तो अनिल सर,
यस राजू।
सर अभी तक कोई आया नहीं है, मैंने हमारे डेलीगेट्स लोग, तो तब तक एक बार आप मेरे को होस्ट वो दे देंगे सर, प्रेजेंटर में वो वीडियो प्ले कर देंगे।
ठीक,
आप लोग देखते रहिएगा सर, वो कोई आने से फिर स्टॉप कर दें।
Hello. Hello, Mr. Raju.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think we should start our program.
Okay. Namaskar everyone and good morning. Welcome to day 4 of the 5-day faculty development program organized by National Institute of Disaster Management in collaboration with 12 central and state universities and research institutes. Before we move ahead in our today's session, let us quickly recapitulate our yesterday session. In the inaugural session, Professor Vinod Kumar Jain, Vice Chancellor, Tezpur University, mentioned that in India, the concept of disaster management has evolved from a reactive approach to a holistic approach. And Professor H.S. Yadav, Director, Northeast Regional Institute of Science and Technology, also underlined that the disaster risk reduction education is crucial for all communities living in disaster-prone area. Sir pointed out that it is possible only when we build a partnership with different stakeholders and synergize our efforts. Universities and institutes, including private universities like Professor Vinod Kumar Jain and Professor H.S. Yadav highlighted, can play a very major role in shifting the narrative from disaster risk reduction for the future by its education, research, debates, dialogues, and policy advocacy. Sri Randeep Kumar Rana, DIG from National Disaster Response Force, discussed the role of NDRF and also mentioned that NDRF is a very specialized force constituted for the purpose of specialist response to a threatened disaster situation or disaster under the Disaster Management Act 2005. He also highlighted that NDRF has proved its significance in achieving the vision by highly skilled rescue and relief operations, regular and intensive training and retraining, and familiarization of exercises with the area of responsibility of NDRF battalions, carrying out mock drills and joint exercise with the various stockholders. Major General retired Dr. V.K. Nayak, Senior Consultant, NDMA, talked about the institutional mechanism for response and mock exercises. And the last presenter, Sri P.P. Srivastava, IAS member, retired member, NDMA Advisory Board, shared his vast knowledge and experience, and he stressed upon the encouragement of traditional knowledge in dealing with disaster. Once again, I welcome all the distinguished speakers, participants who have joined us through Cisco WebEx event platform, all participants also who are watching us live in YouTube. Today, we are joined by Professor Tankeswar Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Guru Jamweswar University of Science and Technology, Sir Tirulnath Singh, Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi Vidyapit, Varanasi, Sri Sarat Chandra, Director, Flood Forecasting and Monitoring, Central Water Commission, Government of India, Professor Gupta, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, and Mr. Anil Kathet, Young Professional, National Institute of Disaster Management. Now, for our keynote address, we have with us Professor Tankeswar Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Guru Jamweswar University of Science and Technology. Prior to this, Sir has also served of Deen Bandhu Chotu Ram University of Science and Technology and CBL Additional in charge. He has a vast experience working in the field of condensed matter physics, nanotechnology, information technology, e-governance, education, administration, management, inspection, etc. Sir is also a recipient of several awards and recognition and has published more than 160 research publications. With these words, I would like to request Professor Tankeswar Kumar, VC, to deliver his keynote address. The stage is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I congratulate NIDM and Pondicherry University for organizing this 5-day faculty development program on national disaster management. As said, it's a very, very, a very important topic in the sense that we
Hello, sir. We are unable to hear you, sir.
hear me, okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello,
Yes, sir.
is it okay now?
Yes, sir. It is okay now.
Okay, so I was just saying that, the condition of this, because of coming this NIDM has improved significantly in our country. And
Sir, I think we lost you again, sir. Hello, sir.
video,
Sir, I request you, sir, kindly, if you can turn off your video, then
I can turn off my video.
yeah,
I can put
strength
it on another. I can put it on another network. I will say maybe on the.
okay, sir.
Okay, just a minute. Hello.
Yes, sir. It is audible now.
It is audible now? Okay, so now it's my private connection. So anyway, I was just talking that, I am from Guru Jambeshwar University of Science and Technology. Guru Jambeshwar ji have been an environmentalist, and here we not only consider the human being, we consider animals and plants. I was just worried, we have so many things happening, but we're not able to save sometimes even the plants and trees and the animals. So I was today just watching TV, and I saw that in California they picked up a horse with the aeroplane and landed at the right place. So that is a kind of the disasters that we have come across in our life. Now we should progress in that direction, that we have the NIDM, under the Ministry of Home Affairs. We should also see that we can include animals and the plants also, well, because whenever something happens, we always think about saving the human beings, but we have to also save the lives of the plants as well as that of the the animals. So that is what I wanted to say, that it should be everything should be included, everyone, that when we say environment, we mean we include plants, animals and human beings. So all are same. That is what I consider as sabka saath sabka vikas, because in my university we included sub mean including the animals and the plants. So that is what we look for, their welfare, and so that is I think important thing. We should extend our this disaster management thing to not only to the, I will say, should not be limited to the saving the life of you must be doing it. But this is just I wanted to say that with these words, I once again congratulate the NIDM and Pondicherry University and all the participants who are participating in this event, and I wish that I could have attended more such programs where we could have learned more about your what the activity is going on. And it is really I see that our the country is doing much better than some of the advanced countries, where whenever we get some cyclones or something like that, then we always see that our this department has performed well, and it is a very significant, and this change has happened, I think, at least in the last 15 or 20 years. We have really improved our management in the disaster conditions. And with these words, I once again congratulate all the organizers and the participants. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai. Small.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir rightly said that like natural disaster are one of the animal harm, that animal are particularly vulnerable to, like earthquake, hurricane, earthquake, cyclone, volcanic eruption, tsunami, and natural forest fire also have devastating impact on them. In journal, if you see animal effects by natural disaster are left to die or to endure the captivating injuries that could have been healed with due medical care. Like wild animals, domesticated animals can also be harmed by natural disaster. However, they have more chances to be rescued. So, sir, your point is very well taken, sir. And NIDM, sir, we are organizing some webinars also regarding this. So, thank you very much, sir, for raising this important issue. Moving ahead, we have with us Professor Triloknath Singh, VC, Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapith, Varanasi. Professor Triloknath Singh is recipient of National Mineral Award 2006. Sir has a very broad spectra of research interests, including the natural and engineered slope stability, rock blasting, rock mechanics, engineering geology, waste dump, rock environment, groundwater control, and carbon sequestration. Prior to this, Sir was also the independent director of HPCL 2017 and professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Sir is an awardee of recipient of several national and international awards. With these words, I would humbly request Professor Trilok Nath Singh to enlighten today's gathering with his keynote address. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are not audible, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are able to hear you, sir.
Now you can hear me? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Arkeshwarji, Dr. Raju, Dr. Harjit Kaur, and all the officers and administrators of NIDM, respected Vice Chancellors of this other university. First of all, I wish to congratulate NIDM for organizing such a wonderful lecture series in terms of, you can say, the faculty development or training to make aware everyone related to any kind of the disasters or natural disasters. Once we talk in the terms of disaster, how to prepare it is the biggest problem, because university education, there are hardly any institution which provides any kind of education system prior to master degree, so that students can aware about the natural disaster and how they are going to help. So that part is lacking in many of the and the colleges. But if you can look at the other university, they have this kind of the system. So I think we have this new education policy, and this new education policy provides us an opportunity to make the system very flexible and easy to adopt. I think we have to make some kind of this which can deal with this natural disaster and emergency. That will be the very, very important. And it should start at the bachelor level and then it goes to the master level. Because many of us who have started working in this area, we have also the similar kind of the situation at the master level. We don't have much understanding about this subject. So definitely, as we are growing, we are going for this, developing so many infrastructure across the India, connecting all the people from the hilly regions to the dense forest with the mainstream. Certainly, we have some level of destruction, and that level of destruction will create some kind of the problem in terms of the stability, in terms of the durability, in terms of the sustainability of a different kind of the structures. I'll take the example of, you are going to have a large infrastructure development in the connectivity, the road connectivity, a railway system. We want to reach to the people in the hilly region through the rail and the road. And on that we have a number of, you can say, this difficulty to make a proper design. That design includes even the stability of the side crust slope, which has been not as a part and parcel of any kind of the tender document. And if you can separate it or separate item, once you can make the road, cut the slope according to our need, and then contractor is bound to go for the faster rate of the development and do a lot of blasting activity, and these blasting activity can create a problem in the later stage. And the classical example of one of the best road which connects Mumbai to Pune, it is considered to be one of the best road construction in terms of the material and whatever this road is widening and other. But we are not in a position to provide a safe road in the time of this rainy season. And everywhere or every year, I can say, we have some small or bigger difficulty and road blockade. So this is the one of the example I said, because it is a very old and the first expressway constructed. Similarly, if you can see in this Uttarakhand or the Himachal Pradesh or the northeastern part of India, we have this problem of the landslide. These landslides are of two nature. One, it is due to the construction or widening of the road. Second one is the natural slope instability in terms of the accumulation of water. There is no drainage system. Sometimes a small pond, natural pond created on the top of the hills, and that water migrates and brings some kind of the disaster. And if you remember, there is a Marlin disaster in near the Pune, where this whole village was washed out at the early morning, and hardly anybody survived, those who are in the village. That was the biggest, and the mud has flowed a half a kilometer due to this poor management of water system. So there are many other examples where we have seen that a natural pond or something has been created, people start taking advantage of it without knowing whether it is a good for the stability of this slope or not. So I think there are many areas where students can be exposed to how to understand this rock mass behavior, soil mass behavior, water rock interaction, and many other reactions and action in this natural process. If you are not understand, then it is very difficult to provide any kind of the solution. I can just give you an example. When we have a problem in many parts of the India, and we are not able to provide the proper rockfall barrier, and we are always creating some kind of this other type of this stability management, and these managements never supported or stopped the rockfall, because that was not the proper treatment. Then after the study, we have started designing this rockfall barrier in India. And then after that, in the many places where it has been in place, that area has at least not reported any kind of the disaster or any kind of the damage of the road and the property, and there is a safe road. We have also made a very nice atlas which has been prepared under the guidance of Ministry of Science and Technology, a road atlas which vulnerability atlas, you can say, a 164 kilometer long stretch starting from the Rishikesh to Kedarnath. How many slopes which are vulnerable, and what are their dimensions, locations, as well as what kind of the treatment is required on that particular road that has been given to, I think, Uttarakhand government also through the DST, that can help in planning and avoiding any kind of the duplicacy work as far as this geological and geotechnical and investigation and the stability analysis, and what kind of intervention is required to make this road the whole year safe and secure for the commuters. In the northeastern part also, of course, the road traffic density is very less, but strategically they are very, very important, and one should think on working on that area. There is a lot of developments has been taken place, and NIDM is one of the pioneer who can providing all kind of the training and making people to aware about the natural disaster. But I think until unless we are not going to have some kind of this natural disaster courses, a specialized courses under the age level, the course, either the diploma or degree, specialize in that. Otherwise, it will be always create some panic condition. As we seen in the time of the COVID also, this is one of type of, you can say, also a disaster which was not described by anybody, having the larger impact across the country, across the geographical boundary. And these are the problems which can deal only once you have the trained manpower, a man who knows how to handle in such a situation, and then only we can understand this. It should be a multidisciplinary. It has a combination of all kind of the expert who can try to prepare the understanding of this subject, understanding the mechanism of the failure, any kind, either this subsidence, sinkholes, slope stability, rock fall, rock slide, mudslides, all kind of these things which one can prepare. Even in the mining field also, we have a lot of, you can say, this engineered slope problem, either the high slope wall or dump material which has been accumulated more than 80 to 90 meters in the height, and they sometimes pose a serious problem, and that many disasters has been reported in the past, either the western coalfield, northern coalfield, as well as the MECL or ECL of the eastern part. But these case study should be taken into the consideration while making the courses. A student should know the history and try to understand, because sometimes these slides are dormant, sometimes it will be repetitive every year, or some type of repetitive after many years. So what is the tendency and trend of strata behavior, that should be properly studied, and one, if you study in detail, then you can go for how to prepare some kind of strategy management to avoid, or you can arrest the failure prior to that. Some instrumentation is also required in the greater detail, so that a student should aware what kind of the instrument one should place, and then only one can decide based on the requirement of the site. Many a times we have seen that a consultant advise the people that you can go for these instruments, a long list. Many of them are not required or adequate or appropriate to keep that instrumentation on that particular site. So one should be very careful So how to obtain a good quality and appropriate data, accurate data system, so that one can prepare some kind of the forecasting models, and then based on that one can go for the treatment also. So a holistic study is required to be understand, and I think if all this mixed together, even this NIDM can start some kind of the courses also for 3 months, 6 months, where you can take the experts and expertise across the country or across the beyond the boundary of that also, that will provide a holistic understanding of any kind of the natural disaster. This earthquake monitoring is also important. Then we have to go for this fire. Then you have this flooding, this water management, how to control the floods, because we have a problem in the flooding. So one part of India is flooding, another part is facing problem or water crisis. So we have the mismatch of the problem because of the larger geographical boundary, and then we have to and try to make a course, make a holistic course which can take care of this A to Z, and some kind of the institution of higher learning should take an initiative to come out with this course, and then we can popularize this course, make open to this many discipline people can enter as a taker and as well as the deliver of this in the system in the some health people, a primary training how they can behave in the time of any disaster, that will be very, very important, because we have seen and reported in the news media that some health care people have properly behaved with those who are suffering from the COVID. Of course, for any course or any kind of training, there is a pain and gain system, and in the time of the crisis, one should ready to take the pain. Once you have adopted that kind of the study where you have to face the challenges, you can face the hardship, and one cannot avoid with this. So starting from this engineering to the science to the social sciences, psychology, all disciplines should participate one way to the other way. So with these words, I'm grateful to the National Institute of Disaster Management and their officers who can associate Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapit Varanasi with their panel, because Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapit is completing 100 years, and it is the foundation is led by Mahatma Gandhi ji himself. And you can see this Mahatma Gandhi's one word is always, one should remember once we are dealing with natural disaster, that nature has given everything to feed the need of this human being or any living organism on the planet Earth. But if you are a greedy, then even the 7 continents is not sufficient enough to make a greedy people happy and satisfied. So I think we should try to learn the nature behavior, nature science, come closer to the nature, and we have a full understanding of the nature, then nature will also behave and help you. Once you are not able to understand, then nature will be also behaving like that, and that is the things which are facing in terms of the disaster of any kind. With these words, once again, I'm thankful to all of you, those who have been participated, and I'm especially thankful to this NIDM for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir rightly raised the point of incorporation of disaster management education in the education curriculum right from our primary education. Gaining strength from their acquired bookish and practical knowledge, student can play a very major role in not only devising the well-informed plans to face an eventuality, but also in hand-holding victims of a disaster through their timely intervention. This is where their presence come to the fore as part of the effective disaster management. Like sir highlighted, now that India has evolved the new education policy 2020, higher education significantly contributes towards sustainable livelihood and economic development of the nation. New education policy 2020 also focuses on promotion of vernacular languages, as these languages are linked to the art and culture. Language is a key tool for communication, and when you are in a stressful situation like disaster, you need to be able to communicate the plan of action in the long language that the people will understand faster, because communication regarding disaster management means being able to understand another individual viewpoint about a specific topic. It is also able to and sir also like emphasize on holistic approach, and the and I would like to inform the participant that National Institute of Disaster Management under the Ministry of Home Affairs offers various online courses on disaster risk reduction in collaboration with World Bank, GFDRR, on various aspects of disaster management. I will request our participant also to visit our website www.nidm.gov.in and have a look at our various online courses. Be interesting to you, and there are so many study materials also which you can get a hold of. Thank you very much, sir, for raising such an important issue. And now I will request Mr. Anil Kathet, Young Professional, Center for Hill Area Development, NIDM, for felicitation address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Raju. A very good morning to all the distinguished dignitaries, panelists, and the participants. As an educational and research institution, the university is by necessity involved in all the phases of disaster management, since it is charged with the mission of contributing broadly to our society. Universities and as an academic institution may need to develop and organize a comprehensive educational disaster program or curriculum for the students as well as for the local communities. The program should be simple, easy to understand, and of high quality. To integrate disaster risk reduction into sustainable development policies and planning, to develop and strengthen institution mechanism and capacities, to build resilience to hazards, and to systematically incorporate risk reduction approaches into the implementation of emergency preparedness, response, and recovery programs. It is imperative to strengthen disaster preparedness and mitigation strategies at all levels. Disaster preparedness can play in saving lives, livelihoods, particularly when integrated into an overall disaster risk reduction approach. The goal of developing disaster risk resilient communities rests heavily upon the success of disaster risk reduction education. At the outset, I would like to propose hearty vote of thanks to Professor T.N. Singh, Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi Kashi, Varanasi, and Professor Venkeshwar Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Guru Jambeshwar University of Science and Technology, for gracing the inaugural session of 4th day of 5 days faculty development program on disaster management, with your presence and motivating, guiding us in our endeavor. Thank you very much, sir. I also express a deep sense of gratitude to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, BSM, Executive Director, NIDM, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division, NIDM, for their supervision and guidance. I also take this opportunity to thank all the central universities that are associated with this training program. Thank you all. Over to you, Mr. Raju.
Thank you very much, sir. With that, we have come to the end of today's inaugural session. Now, moving on to our technical session. Before we move, I will request all the participants to raise questions during our technical session. After each presentation, there will be question answer session, and you can type in your question answer in your question answer chat box. That will be asked to the resource person after his presentation. And I will also like to inform that minimum of 80% attendance is required to be eligible for the certification. So for our first presentation, we have with us Professor Phil Gupta from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. He's a world-renowned figure working in urban floods, and he's a member of UNESCO International Working Group on Sustainable Urban Water Strategies, International Working Group of the IAHR-IWA Joint Committee on Urban Drainage. Sir is also an advisor of National Disaster Management Authority, Government of India. Sir is awardee of many awards like Quality of Life Award by the Association of Commonwealth Universities, London, UK. And like he was also awarded as the Royal Society by the Fellowship and International Center for Excellence in Water Resource Management, a Government of Australia Initiative Fellowship, and many more. Sir has penned down several research publications in international journals. With this, I would like to request Professor to kindly take on the stage. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajiv. Good morning to all the attendees. At the moment, I see that we have 610, 612 attendees. So good morning to all of you. My presentation is approximately 36 minutes. So without wasting much time, let us go directly to the topic. Just take a minute to upload the presentation. Here we are. Rajiv, you can see the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. So, excellent. Thank you. Good morning. So we will be talking of urban floods, the mitigation measures, and most important, as you have seen, we have had extremely heavy rainfall in all parts of India this year, and we will see the various aspects of this issue. Now, early this February, when all the world was talking of climate change and climate crisis before the COVID-19 broke out, Professor Richard Fenner from the University of Cambridge in UK, he wrote in the editorial of the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, a special issue on urban flood resilience, that we are facing a climate emergency because of rising global temperatures, intense and uncertain weather patterns, unregulated development, urban construction increasing the hard impermeable surfaces, then the exposure of the urban population to catastrophic flood damage causing economic loss and, of course, inconvenience. So there is a need for flood-resistant urban infrastructure resilient to both future climate uncertainties and increasing urbanization. Now, as you all know, before urbanization, the area was nice and green. All the water could freely flow over the surface. The water could freely flow under the surface and recharge our groundwater tables. Now, due to urbanization and increasing urbanization, especially with reference to cities, we have constructed on top of these green surfaces. We have constructed multi-story buildings on top of the surfaces. We have decreased the size of the drains by enclosing on the drains floodplains. And because of this, as you can see, obviously the groundwater recharge has decreased and more surface flow is occurring on the surface. And because the drains are not adequate now, we have overflows of the drains and consequent flooding. Now, if we look at the hydrograph, which is a flow of the discharge versus time, before the development, we had low discharges. And for example, let us say I had 100 meter cube per second of water in 45 minutes. Now, after urbanization, because I have paved the surface, all the water will quickly flow onto the surface, and I will have peak within 15 minutes, and we will have a higher peak, maybe between 6 to 10 times of the pre-development value. So instead of 100 meter cube per second, we are now going to receive a 300 to 1000 meter cube per second in the urban areas. And this we are seeing every day in many of our cities. I have had a look at the past 3 years data of the state capitals and other cities. And we have seen that all the state capitals received at least 50 millimeters per day several times in a year, and even crossing 100 millimeters per hour. In yesterday, Mumbai had 324 millimeters of rainfall in 24 hours, and you may have seen on the news the severe flooding that we had. So, as I mentioned, even this year also, all the state capitals have suffered flooding to various extent. Lucknow, Dehradun, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, the list is endless. Now, everybody says, when there is a drain, let us increase the size of the drain. Let us provide additional drain, so to prevent the flooding on the downstream. Now, if I want to provide increase the size of the drain or provide an additional drain, is there space on the urban surface to provide such a drain? When you look at this figure, we have all the urban developments. This is the pre-development situation. And we want to say that because of the increased flows, let me increase the size of the drain. But we have already constructed areas on top. So how do I provide the drain? So it is obvious that this is a very difficult solution in the highly populated urban areas where flooding is recurring. This is going to be very costly. If at all, if it is possible, it is going to be severely disruptive because I have to dig up the roads. This will increase the flow downstream till the work is completed. It will not be effective till fully completed. And as you have seen, it is very difficult to modify or upgrade due to the various utilities like telephone lines, fiber optic fine lines. Some cities have gas supply pipelines and other underground utilities. And of course, space is becoming increasingly difficult in urban areas. So what is the solution? We can have two types of solutions. One is the non-structural measures, which do not involve any construction. And then we have structural measures. Wherever it is possible, we construct the various structures to reduce the flooding. So we will have a quick look at each of these measures as we proceed further. Now, non-structural measures. After the Mumbai 2005 flooding, a brief note that in 2005, when flooding happened on 26 July, IMD had only 2 rain gauges, one at Santa Cruz and one at Colaba. So Colaba is down south here, and Santa Cruz is up here near the international airport. So there is a distance of 22 kilometers between these. And at that time, the readings used to be taken only at 8:30 in the morning and at 5:30 in the evening. But the severe rainfall happened between 11:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon. So the IMD had no way of knowing what is the amount of rainfall at that time. So subsequently, within the next 1 year, we had several meetings with the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai and the Disaster Management Department of the Government of Maharashtra. And the most quickest solution was that we should first of all know how much it is raining. So we proposed that 30 automatic weather stations consisting of rain gauges. As you can see in the figure down here, this is an automatic weather station. It has a collector to collect the rainfall and measure the rainfall, and it has various other gadgets also measuring the wind speed, temperature, humidity, and so on. So 30 automatic weather stations were installed on the BMC premises. Fortunately, in Mumbai, all the fire stations are come under the jurisdiction of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai. So we installed the weather stations on top of each of the fire stations, the BMC head office, and at IIT of Bombay also, so that we could give full support to the BMC. So then these was chosen that we have one automatic weather station in each catchment, and fortunately the fire stations are spread uniformly over the city, so that was not a problem. Most important, the fire stations are manned 24 hours, and anytime flooding happens, it is the fire department which goes to rescue the people. So it is an obvious choice that the automatic weather system should be mounted on top of the fire station, so that the firemen have the best idea of where it is raining heavily, and they can immediately be on standby to rescue the people as soon as the call comes. So the response time is reduced. Then we also train the fire station people to respond. The automatic weather station console comes with a alarm setting. So whenever the rainfall exceeds the predefined amount, in Bombay it is 40 millimeters per hour or 10 millimeters in 50 minutes, the instrument can give a alarm. So when the instrument alarm was observed, the firemen were on standby and ready for any rescue calls. Now, of course, in the first 5 years, I personally went on top of each fire station to pinpoint the exact spot for this. And we trained each of the fire station staff on how to interpret the values on the automatic weather station. In addition, we also installed one ultrasonic flow level gauge on the Mithi River at Powai. So these are the details of the automatic weather station. This is on top of the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai head office. This is the console, which gives you the various wind directions, temperature, humidity, rainfall, total rainfall, rainfall rate, and so on. And this is the console. As you can see, this is the size of a small iPad. And this was the old control room where you had all the hotlines to the various services, police, fire, chief minister, disaster, and so on. And you can also download the data from the console onto your computer for subsequent analysis. And this is the flow gauge installation at the Mithi River, Powai. This is ultrasonic flow gauge. So this is installed within the BMC compound, and you have the ultrasonic flow gauge on top. This is just sending sound waves at the bottom, and the level of the water is reflected, and it is recorded here, 83.8 centimeters on that day. And of course, again, it is downloaded to the computer for further analysis. So with this rainfall data and flow data, we were able to model the flows in Mithi River, and we could predict the rainfall and flooding 30 to 45 minutes before it actually happened in the downstream 10 kilometers away. So this way we were able to alert the authorities that you can please take measures to alert the people and evacuate them if necessary. Now this is, and all this data of the automatic weather stations is available to you live. And this is the link to the website. This is also available on the mobile phone app. So if you go into the app and type disaster management Mumbai, you will get this. So all the rainfall values for all the stations are shown here. So it shows the rainfall in the first 15 minutes, last 1 hour, last 3 hours, last 6 hours, last 12 hours, and last 24 hours. So this is the, I don't know whether you can see this. This is the data of yesterday's rainfall. And you can see we had 6 millimeters in 15 minutes, 9 millimeters in 1 hour, 97 millimeters in 3 hours, 161 millimeters in 6 hours, 295 millimeters in 12 hours, and 391. So I was observing that, and I actually woke up in the middle of the night. So from 12:30 to 2:30, it rained 100 millimeters in 2 hours. So that is a severe rainfall, and obviously several parts got flooded because the Bombay drainage system is designed only for 25 millimeters per hour. So now we all know flood is happening. So what are the measures that we can take? So obviously it is difficult to increase the size of the drains because there is no space available. So let us look at the alternative scenarios which have been found successful both in India and abroad. So here we have a simple concept. Let us consider two channels, each carrying 3 units of water, say one from the left hand side and one from the right hand side. So when these two channels meet, at the next channel, they will carry 3 plus 3, 6 units of flow. And because of various constraints, the downstream channel is having only capacity of 4 units. So obviously at this point where the 6 units goes and it cannot flow into the fully into the 4 unit flow, it will overflow and cause flooding of 2 units of overflows. So how to reduce this flooding and make it zero? Obviously I have to do something before this point. If I construct something here, it is not going to reduce the flooding because I cannot construct because of lack of space. So whatever measures have to be taken from the starting point to the point of overflow. So in between here, I have to provide some sort of measure. So what are the types of measures? So if theoretically I can provide a structure such that after providing the structure, only 2 units of water is flowing from each of them, so that the next pipe receives only 4 units, and obviously 4 and 4 are balancing each other, so there will be no overflows to reduce the flooding. So these devices are known as attenuation devices or storage devices. And let us have a look at the various types of storages that are possible in the urban areas. So these measures are known by several names. In Europe, they are known as the sustainable urban drainage systems. In America, they are known as best management practices. In Australia, they are known as water sensitive urban design. So the various measures, so we can have source control, local disposal such as infiltration, percolation, and porous pavements. We can have inlet control by providing rooftop storage and storage in the parking area. Then we can have on-site detention by providing dry ponds, wet ponds, holding ponds. And then if a space is not available, I have to provide the holding within the drain or the river, as the case may be. Or if there's a wastewater treatment plant, this is available only for where cities like Kolkata, where you have the combined sewer system, then you can provide storage at the wastewater treatment plant also before discharge. Then all these devices, we have to control the flows, we have to delay the stormwater runoff, and we can make them smart through appropriate sensors, which can be operated through mobile phones. So the first measure is that provide the storage on the roof. So whenever construction takes place, we are eliminating the recharge that was taking place before the construction. Now the state of Portland in USA has made it compulsory that whatever infiltration I am destroying at the ground level, it has to be provided at the rooftop level. So as you can see in these pictures, this is the 14th floor of the tower, and on top of the roof, they have to provide equivalent soil and greenery, which is maintaining the same recharge that was happening before the building was constructed at the ground level. So these are various views of the recharge, and they have of course provided a railing so that people don't fall over. And then you can have green lawns also on top of the building, conducive to the local infiltration rates. Then once you have this, the water is diverted from the roof through the means of pipes and gutters to the ground. And all around the building, since I have paved this area, I have to obviously provide infiltration trenches so that the water either infiltrates into the ground if the soil is permeable, or if not, I provide a additional pipe which takes the flows to the main discharge channels. So if you Google this infiltration trench, you will find more than 1 million configurations on the internet, and from that you can choose the one which is most appropriate to your local area. Then we have seen in many cities now that they are providing footpaths. They have paved the footpaths. They have provided concrete blocks known as paver blocks, which are unfortunately totally impervious, and they do not allow the water to infiltrate. Instead, the water, if the drains are not connected properly, the water just accumulates on the surface, and all the sediments and dust and pollution and floating matter, they all congregate into this, and it is not only a quantity problem, but also a quality problem. So this is a picture from Amritsar. And earlier, about 30 years back, we just used to have brick pavements. Bricks were porous and water was able to infiltrate it. So brick is, in my opinion, brick is still a good material for providing the paving because it is impervious. It is also cheaper than the concrete paver blocks. So what we need to do is provide porous pavements which allow the water to infiltrate through it. So the American Society for Testing Materials has defined a porous pavement as one with porosity and permeability high enough to allow water to readily pass and thus significantly influence hydrology, routing habits, and other positive environmental effects. Now there are two basic designs. One is the asphalt or concrete pavement with lacking the finer aggregate. So we actually don't need to put the fine aggregate into the concrete paver blocks. If we do that, if we make the permeable paver blocks, then the water will infiltrate and the problem will be reduced. And they are designed to provide a void content of 15 to 25%. So this is another example of the paver blocks. Here we have the hollow concrete paver blocks. So within the hollows, you can have green grass developing, and this provides both a functional application as well as a aesthetic application. So this looks nice. It is functioning both as a car park. It allows the car to be parked on top of it, and simultaneously it provides greenery, and thirdly it also allows the infiltration of water into the soil. Another thing which we have seen is that the trees are ruthlessly paved and concretized right up to the neck, and then the tree does not have space to breathe, and ultimately after 3, 4, 5 years, due to the growing tree, we have cracks in the pavement. So what we need to do is actually provide adequate area for the tree to grow, and there are permeable resins. So we allow some area for the water to infiltrate and for the tree to grow. So there will be no cracking in the footpath. Simple things, but extremely beneficial for all concerned. Now, the third measure is that to provide so whenever the water rains, it directly goes onto the road and causes flooding downstream. So if we can store the water within the building premises, then we can reduce the amount of water that will reach the areas downstream of this. So there are three options. Commonly, people perceive that rainwater harvesting means simply take a pipe from the roof and take it to the ground and let it infiltrate into the soil. But as you may have seen, the infiltration rate is maybe 50 millimeters per month or 50 millimeters per year, depending on the type of soil you have. Whereas the rainfall is happening in 1 hour. We are having 50, 100, 200 millimeters of rainfall occurring in 1 hour. So obviously, the groundwater recharge will not work here. So we have to provide storage so that the water is stored first and then it can be utilized later on. So storage is possible in three places. One is on the top of the roof itself. You provide construction on top of the building where the water is stored, and subsequently this water can be used for non-drinking purposes like washing the cars, watering the lawns, and so on. If space on roof is not there, then you can provide syntax tanks on the ground level or any other level in case of multi-story buildings. Water is stored there. Again, it is beneficial to the people. And if even storage is not there on the surface, then you can provide underground storage tanks. So all these three solutions have the advantage that the storage water is beneficial to the person who is taking out the measures. Whereas in the case of groundwater recharge, the benefit happens to the person downstream. So this is directly beneficial to the individual or building society which installs such measures. Then a study was conducted by one of our colleagues, Professor David Butler at Imperial College in London. He actually installed various sizes syntax water tanks in the small residential area. And he found that by installing 100 liters, the reduction in overflows was 11%, whereas with 1000 liters, the reduction in overflow was 42%. So this way, if everybody provides the storage within their premises, instead of 5 feet of flooding, I will have only 2 feet of flooding, which is quite manageable by the local population which gets flooded. Then, of course, this is an innovative measure. Why only should I be storing rainwater? Why not the solar energy also? So this is a syntax tank with the solar panels on top. So they are given a slight incline, so water is collected. It also increases the surface area for of collecting the rainfall. So if I put this on a roof, if I have a small roof, I can also prevent the water from falling alongside the roof from the ground below and increase the surface area. Of course, you can increase the size to even bigger areas based on the stability of the structure, and you can also increase the size of the tank. So this way, we can harvest both solar energy as well as rainwater. Then some examples. So this is a rainwater harvesting sector on the way to Nashik. So this is very simple. You have a roof here. Then you have pipes collecting the water from the asbestos roof. This is taken to the syntax tank. And at the bottom, I have the pipe. So this is actually a public toilet. So all the water is available for the public toilet from the rainwater collected on the roof here. On the other side of the world, in Brazil, exactly similar idea. You have the rooftop here, you have the pipe coming here, you have the pipe coming here, and the water is stored in this tank, and it is used by this household. So very simple concept. It will not cost you more than 20,000 rupees to install this measure in your house. Then the other fourth option is that providing detention ponds. Now, technically, there are three types of ponds: detention pond, and wetlands. But these terms are used intermittently. The specific difference between each of these is that the detention pond is dry between the flood events. The retention pond has some water always, so it could be a lake. And the wetlands also have plants in them. So a lot of talk of constructed wetlands has taken place. So we'll have a look at these detention ponds. So this is the Kirigaoka regulating pond in Japan. So as you can see, this is a low-lying area, and you have around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 10 to 15 tennis courts here, and people can enjoy the tennis in the summer. And notice these steps going up to the clubhouse here. So during normal times, you can play tennis, you can have recreation, And during other times when it rains heavily, what happens? The entire tennis courts, they become a storage area for the rainwater. Notice the steps here. The water has come right up to halfway through the depression that we had earlier, as you can see here. So in this way, this will not cause any damage or disruption to anybody except the tennis court. And anyway, you cannot play tennis when it is raining heavily. Subsequently, this pond will empty within 24 to 48 hours, and it can again be washed and cleaned. So the major advantage is that we have used the low-lying area for recreation. We have used the low-lying area for storing the water, because flooding happens 2 to 3 times a year. And remaining 360 days, the facility is available for everyone. So there is no damage to downstream, there is no disruption to the traffic, and other similar advantages. Now, after the Mumbai floods, we also tried to provide similar options, but there was a very little space available due to over-urbanization. So we had to provide inline storage on the Mithi River. So after the Mumbai flood, 6-meter high flood wall was constructed on either side of the river to prevent overtopping of the water and also to prevent encroachments from coming onto the bed of the river. So as you can see, this is a picture in the dry weather. This is just raw sewage from the slums going into this. Here we provided orifices so that the dry weather flow could flow under the this wall that we constructed. This is technically known as a weir. And during heavy rainfall, because the flow is more than the ability of the water to go from under, the water backs up behind this. As you can see in this second figure, water backs up here. And this way we were able to provide 3,000 cubic meters of storage in this holding pond. So this way, this caused reduction in the flows reaching downstream. It delayed the flows to reach downstream by 10 minutes, and it reduced the volume of flows reaching downstream suddenly. So if this wall had not been there, all this water would have reached downstream and caused flooding in the downstream area. Similarly, another holding pond was constructed upstream. This is the holding pond in the RA Milk area, where you have around again 3,000 cubic meters of storage was provided here. The water comes in, as you can see, it is stored here, and gradually it is flowing over the surface. And this is on the downstream. So this is the Juhu Ville Parle link road, and the water is flowing here from here, and it is coming downstream to the Mithi River. So this way, we were able to provide about a 20 minutes delay to the water suddenly reaching downstream. We were able to provide 6,000 meter cube of storage. And all these were, of course, with the alerting system and the flow measurement. It provided a 45 minutes of lead time for the authorities to set up their act to provide support to the people. Now, when space is not available even everywhere, then you have to provide space under the existing open spaces or football fields. So in Hong Kong, they have provided a huge underground tank under the football field. So when they first thought of this, they said if we want to upgrade the existing drains and construct 7-kilometer long new culverts in the most densely building districts, it would have taken 10 years to complete, and it would have caused a lot of destruction. So obviously, then they decided that okay, can you switch off the mic, please? Yeah, thank you. So then you find that below the only option available is below the existing playing fields or open spaces. So in Hong Kong, they have constructed 100,000 cubic meter of storage tank. As you can see, the person here is around 1.5 meters, and the height of this is around 9 to 11 meters. So this basically stores all the water, and obviously after the rainfall is over, this can be allowed to flow by gravity, or it can be pumped out depending on the topography of the area. Then the similar measures have been provided in Osaka. So Osaka, they have taken huge underground pipes. These are 6.5 meters diameter. All the excess storm water is taken to the huge underground storage tanks, 6.24 meters below the ground level, and at 6.5 meter diameter tunnels. So the trunk sewer is 8.5 kilometers long, and the sub-trunk sewer is 3.7 kilometers. Total length is 12.2 kilometers, and the storage capacity is 300,000 cubic meters in this system. So this is known as the Naniwa Grand Floodway in Osaka. And as you can see, this is the actual picture. So this is the Japanese worker standing. This is 6 meters 5 height of the tunnel, 24 meters under the ground. And obviously at the end of the system, you have a pumping station to pump out the water from this underground storage. Now, when I went to Japan, we went down to the pumping station underground, and everybody says, oh, let us do this. But there are several issues involved. What if the power fails suddenly? If the power fails, obviously your pumping will not take place and it will cause flooding, and the damage will be much worse than before. So in the underground system, we went down the stairs, and first of all, we saw 3 huge diesel storage tanks. And this is the size of this tank is the size of what you see on the back of the trucks, which are carrying the petrol and diesel from one point to the other. So 3 such large tanks were provided, each of 50,000 liters capacity, so that even if the power fails, they have enough fuel to supply the pumping and maintain the pumps for the next 24 to 48 hours. Then when we looked at the generator, this is basically very similar to a aeroplane engine. It is a turbine generator. And with this, they were able to generate the power for running the pumps. So huge investment is required, and huge alertness and operation is required. And these systems may be operated at the most 2 to 5 times a year. Remaining 360 days, they will not be there, but you have to maintain them. Otherwise, in times of need, they will not work. So regular maintenance is required, alertness of the staff is required, and dedication from the personnel is required. So the take-home message is that the sustainable urban drainage system should be part of the drainage master plan, and catchment should be the unit of planning. We are just doing the planning by area A, Gandhi Nagar, Nehru Nagar, and so on. But we should look at those of you who have studied hydrology, they will know that catchment is the natural drainage for the water, and we should use catchment as the basis of planning. Then in each city, in each location, we can identify the locations for source control, like rooftop storage, storage in the playgrounds, or on-site detention in the open areas. If that is not available, then inline detention in the open stormwater drain or river, as the case may be. And for future new developing areas, we should identify low-lying areas and provide recreation facilities like football fields and tennis courts. So instead of having the garden on top of a hill and the houses in the low-lying area, I should have the houses on top of the hill and the garden in the low-lying area. So this, and then of course we have to improve drainage features of the existing drains. So this is the summary of what we have just discussed. Now these are documented in the NDMA Urban Flood Disaster Management Guidelines. They are available on the NDMA website. So if you type in Google NDMA Urban Flood Disaster Management Guidelines, you will get around 160 pages of full details of all these measures which we have discussed. And technical details of these are also provided in the storm drainage manual brought out by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Can you please mute your mic? Thank you. So the storm drainage manual, again, this can be downloaded from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs website. And this provides the technical details of designing of each of these. It also provides on how to provide the rainfall capacity and so on for the design. Then we are all talking of 500 Amrit cities and 100 smart cities. But unless we incorporate the basic feasible measures into future planning of these cities, our systems will again flood again and again. Now, if you have studied the Amrit City mission statement, Amrit cities have 5 main thrust areas: water supply, sewerage, stormwater drains, enhancing the green areas, and only transportation is one of the aspects. But now points 1, 2, 3, and 5 can easily be integrated when we are planning for the water infrastructure. So the take-home message: when flooded, turn around, don't drown. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank more people are facing control suffering due to the climate crisis, unless there are some major transformation to global society. Urban flood cannot be managed in isolation at the city scale, and response to like potential flood impact and complicated by political, social, economic, and environmental changes. To understand this unique feature of urban flood management, a framework should be developed in which spatio-temporal relations are further defined and investigated. Like Sir highlighted very nicely, a green roof will help control the storm water runoff and retention. The increased urbanization of town and cities has resulted in less green space and more impervious surface. Precipitation generally runoff from the of the building into the gutters and flow into a storm sewer. Sir, for a wonderful presentation, sir. We have 2 to 3 questions for you, sir.
Yes, please.
The first question is, sir, flooding often result in shutdown of essential infrastructure. So, are there any progress in conceptualizing the operation of these essential utilities in extreme weather event?
We have presented an integrated plan. So, at the moment, we are alerting these utilities in Mumbai, and they are rescheduling the services based on the flood alerts. But in the long term, we have to have incorporation of these sustainable management practices, and we have to go underground. Flood-proof underground structures. We should have tunnels for the vehicles. So if there's a flooding area which gets frequently flooded and there is no other option, then I will have to construct an underground transportation channel. For example, we are all now constructing the underground metros for rapid rail transfer. So similarly, we can also have underground roads for the transportation of people with buses and cars. But that will take the huge resources, and we have to look at the benefit cost ratio, and obviously someone has to pay. We are paying our income tax, other people should also pay for this. Thank you. I can't hear you.
Pardon me, sir. The
Yes.
second question is the continuation, like just you have said, we have limited resources. The second question says, there is seldom enough money to go around and difficult decision has to be made regarding spending priorities. So like most of the times, sir, immediate short-term need may crowd out over our long-term requirement. So how can state or district, they can manage such huge investment?
I think that is a answer which I am not the right person. I am a technical person, but often I can say that we have to prioritize. For example, now with COVID, all the resources are going to control the COVID, and next year we will be even short of resources. But we have to prioritize that. Again, you have to have a benefit cost ratio analysis. What is the benefit and what is the cost, and that will be the deciding factor for providing each of the solutions.
And the last question, sir, one of the assistant professor have asked this: is there any urban flood susceptibility map available at very small, so that this map can be used for further research?
We have developed the urban flood hazard map for Mumbai after the 2005 Mumbai floods, and other cities are also trying to develop such maps. Obviously, resources and manpower required to develop such maps. Again, you have to look at the benefit cost ratio, and obviously people have to you have to pay the funds so that we can hire the people to carry out such studies. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that being said, let us move on with our second presentation of the day. For that, we have with us Mr. Anil Kathet, young professional, Center for Hill Area Development, Geometeorological Risk Management Division, National Institute of Disaster Management. He is postgraduate in geology with over 8.5 year of experience in the field of landslide hazard management and disaster management. Prior to joining NIDM, he has worked with some of the prestigious organizations such as UNDP, NIUA, and CRRI. He penned down about 20 research papers on various aspects of landslide hazard mitigation and management, contributed in drafting the engineer guideline on landslide mitigation measure for Indian road. With these words, I would like to pass on the stage to Mr. Anil Kathet. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajiv. And a very good morning to all the participants. I will be talking about landslide issues and management in our country. The safety of slopes and management of landslides have always been major concern, especially in the hilly region across the globe. Landslides are one of the major hydrogeological hazards that affects a large part of India, from mighty Himalayan range in north to the coastal areas of our south states. India, when you look according to area-wise, is the seventh largest country in the world and is persistently being knocked by landslides of with different magnitude throughout the history. According to the Geological Survey of India, which is the nodal agency in India for landslide, which is a nodal agency in the India for landslide management and studies, around 0.42 million square kilometer of our lands. Our nation's lands area is vulnerable to landslides. That is about 12.6% of the total land area of India. That spans over 19 odd states and 4 union territories, all the northern Himalayan states and UTs, 7 sister states of northeast Himalayan, UTs of Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh, Pondicherry, Andaman and Nicobar, and in south like Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. All these states are vulnerable to various kinds of landslides. So, as per available recorded data, the history of landslides in India way back to early 18th century, yet the devastating potential of the landslide got attention of the nation after the episode of Great Alaknanda tragedy of 1970 that happens in Garhwal region of Uttarakhand. The catastrophic event demonstrated its shattering impact right from its initiation point to hundreds of kilometers downstream. The flood generated due to collapse of landslide dam lake completely swept away Belakulchi hamlet in upper region, and also convoy of 30 buses and 13 bridges were devastated by the flood. The other event which turned heads of thinkers, policymakers, and professionals from different fields trading with earth science towards landslide was Malpa landslide that occurred in 1998 and 1998 in Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand, which whipped away the entire village of Malpa and killed more than hundreds of people. Such nightmare scenario keep haunting our local communities, our surroundings every now and then. In my talk, I will be discussing the impacts of landslides, potential landslide indicators, basic framework for landslide risk mapping, risk management, and some mitigation measures, and as well as the development of landslide management studies in our country. So, what is a landslide? A landslide can be portrayed as an episode of downward and outward displacement movement ranging from very slow to rapid in velocity of any kind of slow forming material, whether it is rock, soil, or their combination under the influence of gravity. So this is the definition of landslides. These are the areas vulnerable to landslides in India, like in Himalaya, that is North Himalaya, UP of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, and states like Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. In Northeast Himalaya, Sikkim and other seven sister states in Western Ghats and Nilgiris, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Goa, Kerala, Karnataka, in Indian plateaus. States like Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh are vulnerable to landslides in Eastern Ghats, Andhra Pradesh, and Union Territory of Puducherry. And Andaman and Nicobar Islands are also vulnerable to landslide in India. So, what's the reason of the instability in the slope? Some slopes are susceptible to landslide, where others are comparatively stable. Many factors contribute to instability of slopes, and this includes high relief, drainage, bedrock, vegetation, climate, other disasters like earthquake, flash flood, glacial lake outburst floods, as well as anthropogenic activities. The condition factor governing landslide can be classified into inherent, which are their inherent characteristics, and as well as external. External factors condition include precipitation, heavy precipitation, vibration that can be caused due to earthquake or due to anthropogenic activities like blasting, explosions, loading or unloading of slopes. Construction activities without a proper understanding of the slope dynamics have augmented the number of landslide incidents in the country. According to the result publication of UK-based university, 28% of landslides incidents in India are as a result of construction activities. Multi-hazard facet of landslide. Landslide are multifaceted phenomena and having a broad spectrum of magnitude types that can be triggered by other disasters, like I was talking, such as earthquake, unprecedented precipitation, wildfires, cyclone, floods, glacial lake outburst floods, cloud burst, as well as anthropogenic activities, unregulated cutting of hills, haphazard construction of buildings, roads on fragile slopes, and as well as mining. Landslides are also responsible for inducing hazards, flood, like tsunami. Collapse of landslide dam lake can generate devastating flash flood, as the example was of Great Alexander tragedy of 1970. Similarly, episodes of submarine landslides are enough capable of producing huge tsunami in coastal areas that can be potential threat to community and coastal ecosystem. And for example, Indonesian tsunami of 2018 that caused huge damage to our society and community. Further, the climate change, which is the hot topic in today's era, and its adverse impact on temperature and precipitation will further frame the potential of landslide disaster and will be constantly challenging our strategies of landslide risk reduction and resilience. The change in frequency and intensity of rainfall at each level will amplify the magnitude and number of landslide incidents, and thus more human settlements. Our structures, our infrastructure will be exposed to its destructive impacts. These are some of the potential landslide risk indicators. Simple observations and inspection may assist in assessing potential landslide hazard. It is important to note that some of these features can also be due to cause other than landslides. And some indicators of landslides, unstable slopes are saturated ground or seeps in areas that are not typically wet, new cracks, scarps, or unusual bulge in the ground or road or pavements, sticking doors, windows, visibly open space indicating jams, frames out of plumb is also an indicator of landslides. Soil moving away from foundation, tilting or cracking of concrete floors, foundations, broken water lines, other ground utilities, leaning telephone poles or electric poles or tilting trees are also an indicator of potential landslide zone. Offset fences, lines, or retaining walls, sunken, displaced road surface, rapid increase in Creek water was possibly accompanied by increased soil content. Certain decrease in creek water level through rain is still continuing or recently stopped. Spraying seeds or saturated ground in areas that have not typically been wet. Thorough cracks in walls, gaps between roofs and walls, etc. This all are the landslide indicator. One a common person can also visualize this signs in hilly terrains and can identify whether the slope is prone to landslide or not. Impacts of landslides. So impacts, landslides can thrust direct impact as well as indirect impacts. Direct impacts are those that are first order consequences which occur during and immediately after an episode of landslide, such as death and damage to our infrastructure and structure. Whereas in indirect impact, indirect impact includes like the psychological impacts, um, evacuation. It is very hard for the people living in an area to evacuate to other places in scene of any landslide episodes. The impacts of landslide can be categorized as tangible and intangible. Tangible impacts are those to which it is possible to assign reasonable, reliable monetary values such as replacement of damaged properties, roads, bridges, etc. And intangible are those that cannot be satisfactorily assessed in monetary terms. For example, loss of human lives. There are certain concerns related to landslides, physical injury, loss of human lives, property infrastructure damage, economic loss, loss of agriculture, land, loss of forest cover. Landslide have also impact on variety of resources like roadways, highways, communication, water supplies, fisheries, sewage disposal system, forest, dams, and reservoirs. I will share the amount of indirect losses a landslide can cause. This is the very notorious landslide colors or landslide, which was first initiated in year 1920 at kilometer 147 on National Highway 58 in Uttarakhand, and still threatening communities and the highway. Then I was working with Center Road Research Institute, carried out a study to estimate the cost of indirect losses related to highway closure during September, October in year 2010. In 2010, due to closure of national highway at this particular point, were forced to travel through bypass road. That was 20 meters down. See here, you can see this is the main highway, National Highway 58, and this is the bypass which traveler were using due to closure of National Highway 58 due to landslide. Total touring cost for 45 days were calculated, which was more than 2.4 million rupees. This indirect cost of touring is still a low estimate, as it does not include other businesses, consequences from loss of local resources, loss associated with business at local shops, restaurants, tourist sites, and hotels. Actual loss due to landslide are still the topic of debate, as in the role of secondary hazard after primary disaster like earthquake, flash flood. Landslide are not given their due in the number of death, and as well as they play a role of constant to the response and rescue operations after incidents of primary hazards. This is the basic framework of landslide risk mapping. The step of landslide risk mapping is landslide inventory and database. The landslide database and inventory is an important. In fact, first steps towards not only the landslide hazard mapping and risk assessment, but also towards any of the landslide hazard mitigation and management program. Landslide inventory maps show the distribution of past and active landslides, their relative activity, landslide density, geomorphic attributes within an area. Some geomorphic attributes includes slopes, aspects, bed lithology, structures, soil types, depth of overburden, moisture content, and geomorphic process such as gulling, soil erosion, and so on. After landslide inventory and database, the second step is landslide susceptibility mapping. Landslide susceptibility mapping usually involves developing an inventory of landslides which have occurred in the past, together with an assessment of area with a potential to experience landsliding in the future, but with no assessment of the frequency of the occurrence of land. It is just show the probable area that may fail in future. Susceptibility mapping involves the rating of terrain units according to their tendency to produce landslide in future. This is depend on the topography, geology, technical properties, climate, vegetation, photogenic factors such as development, clearing of vegetation. The scale of sustainability is relatively one. Sustainability maps are prepared to locate, identify the area that are susceptible to future stability problems, and the landslide hazard mapping is a step further of sustainability. Such analysis and quantitative process, whereby initially a broad appreciation of the hazard event and their likelihood, probability of occurrence, and the resulting consequences are developed. This will hazard map will assist in determining which aspects need more in-depth investigation. And the final is landslide risk mapping. It takes the outcomes of hazard mapping and assess the potential damage to persons, annual probability of the person most at the risk, and to the property for the element at risk, accounting for temporal and spatial probability and vulnerability. This is the framework for landslide risk management. Earlier was the landslide risk mapping, and this is this framework is divided into two. First one is risk assessment. Second one is risk treatment. In risk assessment, the first step is to identify the landslide hazard. What are the characteristics of hazard, type, geometry, risk analysis, risk evaluation. Risk assessment involves evaluating risk, making judgment on the acceptability of the risk, and evaluating remedial options, mitigation measures. Such assessment depends on the likelihood, the probability of landslide hazard event being considered, and societal acceptance of certain level risk. This where policy and decision makers overlap with the geological and geotechnical professionals in making decisions about acceptable risk and appropriate development options. The second part, in assessing landslide hazard and risk, one should also take an account of what are the community's value, what are their expectation, what the community wants and what it does not want, which area are or likely to be under pressure for development, what infrastructure already exists near a landslide hazard, buildings, network, other utilities, and the value of the infrastructure. What level of risk the community is prepared to accept or not accept. In practice, it is easier to define what the community will not accept using community relation to past event as a guide. Consideration of the feasibility, effectiveness versus cost of possible engineering solution or other risk reducing mitigation works. The other part is landslide risk treatment. The risk treatment is the final stage landslide risk management process and provides the methodology to in controlling the risk of landslides, feasible options for risk mitigation for each risk assessment are to be identified and discussed, including the reduced risk by adoption and adoption of those options. These are some of the mitigation measures which can be used. The main factor which contribute to landslides are slope, water, and geological structures. For slopes, retaining wall may be constructed against the slope, which can prevent rolling down of material. Terracing of the slope is and also an effective measures for landslides. Water, the proper drainage system is the biggest reason behind landslides in our hilly terrains. So, proper drainage network for quick removal of percolating moisture or rainwater by reconstructing ditches and waterways along the slope is a good option for controlling the landslides. And third one is geological structure. Weak plains or zones may covered or grouted to prevent relocation of water. This increases the compaction of loose material. Some of remedial measures that can be used to stabilize the slope. First one is modification of slope geometry. Material can be removed from the slopes or material can add to the slopes, maintaining the stability of slope. Second one is drainage, surface drainage, divert water from flowing onto the slides. Shallow, deep trench drain filled with street draining geomaterial, buttress, counter force of coarse grain materials. Remedial measures can be used to stabilize unstable slope. Now I will be discussing some of the development of in landslide management in our country. A high power committee was constituted in year 1999, focusing on the pillars to learning of past disasters in India and outside the country. The high power committees in 1999 endeavor to provide a new conceptual framework to diminish the impact of disasters. The community exhorted focusing on the preparedness to the prevention, reduction in addition mitigation of disaster. The natural as well as man-made hazards were classified under 5 categories by the committee, by the high power committee, and landslides were placed under the geological related disaster group. The committee highlighted that landslides are predictable and adverse impact caused by them can be minimized or even averted with proper proper systematic studies. In high power committee report that was formulated in year 2001, priorities were given to landslide hazard identification, improved mapping, assessment to identify the existing and potential slope failure, land use patterns, methods, and development of reliable risk assessment besides sensitizing the community about the threats of landslides, as well as the community also emphasized to increase the R&D on prediction and forecasting of the landslides, especially for old landslides that have potential for reactivation, recurring landslides, and those occurring in the areas known to be hazardous. The second intervention was made by National Disaster Management Authority. They devised guidelines on management of landslide and snow avalanche in year 2009, apprehending the enormous destructive potential of landslides and the need to reduce the resultant loss of and economy. NDMA in the year 2009 materialized the National Disaster Management Guidelines on landslide and snow avalanche. The guidelines incorporated regulatory and non-regulatory framework to institutionalize the landslide hazard mitigation efforts, apart from enhancing the capacity of society to take appropriate measures to avoid, to reduce the risk and cost that are associated with landslide hazard, to address the challenges against the landslide risk reduction and resilience. 9 major areas were acknowledged for systematic, synchronized, and effective management of landslides. These are the 9 areas that were acknowledged in the management guidelines on landslide and snow avalanche. Number 1 was landslide ability and risk assessment, and emphasis was given on identify the hazard, its vulnerability, risk assessment. The guidelines also highlighted the need of creating landslide inventory database, assessing the vulnerability of different areas in the country for landslides and resources that are at the risk for appropriate planning and decision making. Second one is multi-hazard conceptualization. Landslide can occur as a secondary product of other disasters, like I was mentioning earlier, from earthquakes, flash flood, cloud bursts, glacial lake outburst floods. Other hazards like floods, flash floods can also be initiated as a consequences of landslide. Therefore, there is a need for a holistic multi-hazard approach for landslide risk reduction and resilience. Third point was landslide remediation practice. The emphasis was given for fostering efficacious remediation and mitigation techniques. In addition to landslide monitoring and developing early warning systems, aiming for pace-setter example to build the confidence for landslide risk reduction and resilience among the affected communities. The next one was research and development, monitoring and early warning. Landslide are among hazards that are predictable, as was declared by a high-power committee in 2001, and controllable, provided active scientific research is carried out, understanding the mechanism, triggering factor of landslides, investigation, instrumentation, real-time monitoring, early warning system, and multi-hazard approach for assessing the potential of other hazards in activating and generating landslides. The next point that was highlighted in the National Disaster Management in the guidelines was knowledge network and management. The guidelines quoted digital and updated information database on hazards associated, loss assessment, dissemination of technical information, and maps, essential component for managing the disaster. Next one component was capacity building and training. Enhancing the capacity of that are dealing with landslide is request for teaching, for reducing the risk landslides and developing resilience against the hazard. Further, the methodology of detailed site-specific recognition, landslide risk assessment, and so on have to be standardized, and exiting course of practice related to landslides should be suitably modified as per the current scenario. And the next one was public awareness and education. Communities of landslide-prone areas are worst affected in case of any disaster landslide. Therefore, it is utmost important to create awareness among them about risks of landslide and the measures that can be used to avoid or minimize the ill impact of landslides in their respective areas. The awareness can be created through education, various face-to-face training programs, poster highlighting the do's and don'ts related to landslides, audiovisual ads, as well as media campaign. Next element of the guideline was emergency preparedness and response. Developing a multi-stakeholder, which include scientific researchers, engineers, local disaster managers, disaster response force, and state disaster response force, coordination for emergency preparedness, rescue, relief, and rehabilitation of affected communities. And next one was regulation and enforcement. The guidance also exhorted on setting up a techno-legal mechanism for assessing the landslide hazard and reducing its impact on the vulnerable area and communities, with provision for enforcing that are needed to be implemented. So these components were given in the guidelines that was produced by National Disaster Management Authority on landslide and snow avalanche. In year 2019, National Disaster Management Authority come up with national landslide risk management strategies. And the aim of the strategy was to address all the odds challenges of landslide at national level as well as at local level. This document was in accordance with the fifth target of the SETI framework for disaster risk reduction, and the fifth target of SETI framework was to substantially increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2020. This recommendation on all the major components of landslides, disaster risk reduction, and management. And the components which were focused are landslide hazard mapping, monitoring early warning system, awareness generation programs, capacity building and training, mountain zone regulation policies, mitigation of landslides, and creation of a special purpose vehicle for landscape management. A number of recommendations were laid in national landslide risk management strategies, and some of them were, as most of the landslide hazard maps are available at small scale, they have limited efficacy in any development activities. Hence, the need was felt to produce maps at macro and meso scale using advanced scientific art, state of art such as unmanned aerial vehicle, terrestrial laser scanner, and very high resolution Earth observation data. The other recommendation that was laid by the strategy was to foster the R&D for development of early warning system based on rain threshold, earthquake-induced landslide modeling, and wireless sensor network-based instrumentation. To promote the culture of awareness generation, preparedness by involving and educating the local communities, especially the youth, about the landslide management as well as other hazard of their respective area was also highlighted in the strategies. Another point that was recommended was to identify the target group for from national to grassroots level and enhance their capacity of landslide risk reduction through training programs, having upgraded and simplified content with new technological inputs. Review and updation of existing codes, standard guidelines for landslide management were also highlighted in the strategic document. And one point was also to identify most problematic landslide site and to identify suitable control measures for that site and establish that site as a pace-setter example for managing the landslides in hilly areas. And last one was to establish a national level center dedicated only for landslide research studies and management. This point was also highlighted in High Power Committee report of 2001. A number of initiatives were taken in the country for the interventions. Some of the initiatives that were taken in the country, like geological, I mentioned that Geological Survey of India that was under the Ministry of Mines, associated with landslide studies in the country since 1880s. So GSI was declared nodal agency for undertaking research and development in the field of landslide management in the year 2004. In 2012, government constituted a technical advisory committee for landslide mitigation and management to foster landslide-related research in the field of mapping, monitoring, and capacity enhancement. In 2014, Geological Survey of India launched a National Landslide Susceptibility Mapping program to cover landslide-prone areas of country to create a dynamic National Landslide Susceptibility Geodatabase, GIS-based seamless landslide susceptibility maps, and a national-wide repository on GIS-based landslide inventory. The other achievement of GSI include collaboration with national and international organizations and institutes for development of science and technology in the field of mapping, hazard, risk assessment, instrumentation, as well as in the field of early warning for the landslides. Similarly, Bureau of Indian Standard published a number of course guidelines related to the different facets of landslide management, such as landslide hazard, zonation mapping, course related to the design and construction of various retaining walls, landslide control, and remedial measures. Similarly, Indian Road Congress helped the stakeholders concerning landslides, especially on roads and highways, through their guidelines on landslide mitigation, prevention, and corrections. Building Material and Technology Promotion Council that works under Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs produced third edition of Vulnerability Atlas of India in year 2019 that provide state-wise hazard maps and damage risk table for whole country, institute, organizations, as well as common people can utilize given information and data in the atlas for developing methodologies for mitigation and preventions of disasters. The Institute of Disaster Management has also taken a number of initiatives in the field of landslide management in pursuance of mandate of the Act of 2005 that mandated an NIDM for capacity enhancement. National Institute of Disaster Management developed training module on comprehensive landslide risk management in year 2012. Besides face-to-face online training program on landslide risk reduction and resilience, NIDM was also part of Indo-Japanese Cooperation on Landslides. Also, Center for Excellence on Landslide Disaster Reduction 2011-14 was conferred to an NIDM by International Consortium on Landslides in November 2019. NIDM organized first of its kind international conference on landslide risk reduction and resilience in the country. Also, NIDM published various documents on landslides, like landslide preparedness guidelines for safety of buildings on slopes, that has been developed to provide a basic idea about what is landslide, what factors trigger landslide, and what mitigation measures can be used to decrease the landslide hazard and risk. This consists of various avoidance, prevention, mitigation practice that can be followed easily and focus on generalized idea of planning and site selection to construct house in landslide-prone areas to minimize the vulnerability towards landslide hazard. Also, NIDM published a directory of institution and resource person for landslide management in India. Apart from this, selected annotated bibliography and bibliography was also bibliography on landslide was also published by NIDM, and the aim was that we was to systematically organize a source of previous literature and research work on landslide for the interested researchers for their future research. It can also be helpful to those who have been knowing about the landslide publication of any particular area in the country. We the human have always exploited the nature to fulfill our insatiable hunger for growth development without considering the health status of our slopes. We need to synchronize our activities with the attributes of slopes we are living in. Otherwise, when nature will come into play, it will make all our studies look like kindergarten stuff. We need to make disaster risk reduction a part of our regular curriculum at school level as well as universities level. Also, we need to enhance the capacity of our local communities for DRR. 8 point of our Honorable Prime Minister on DRR also highlighted the need to build on local capacity and initiatives, and people should be trained when, what, and how they should respond to minimize the risk of disaster. Our focus should be on developing a culture of safety and resilience. Some way forward that can be taken from the national intervention on landslide risk reduction and resilience are to establish a national level center that will work dedicatedly on landslide management. And this point was highlighted in various times in High Power Committee Report 2001, in the guidelines that was produced by NDMA in 2009, National Landslide Risk Management Strategy in 2019, also highlighted the need to establish a specialized center on that will work dedicatedly for landslide research and risk management. Another point was to set an example for landslide management and develop a robust early warning system and enhancing the capacity of local communities so that we can reduce the risk of upcoming landslide hazard. That's all. Over to you, Raju.
Thank you, sir, for your detailed presentation. Landslide hazards rank high among the hydrogeological hazards because they pose a threat to life, ranging from disruption of normal activities to widespread loss of life, property, and destruction in large part of mountainous region of India. Landslides are present in all continents and play a very important role in the evolution of landscape. They also represent a very serious hazard in many areas of the world. Preparing landslide map is important to document the extent of landslide phenomena in a region, to investigate the distribution types, pattern, recurrence, and statistic of slope failure, as sir has highlighted. And sir also talked about the National Landslide Risk Management Strategy document, which addresses all the component of landslide disaster risk reduction and management, such as hazard mapping, monitoring and early warning system, awareness program, capacity building and training, regulation and policies, stabilization and mitigation of landslide, etc. This strategy, as highlighted by Mr. Anil Kathayat, envisage the specific recommendation for the concerned nodal agency or ministries, departments, states, and other stakeholders so as to avert or reduce the impact of future landslide calamities. Thank you once again, sir. We have question for you, sir. So the question is raised by Tushar Pradhan, Sardar Ramesh Sudhan, and several others. The question is, development in hilly areas has been in a clash with hill ecology. As we see roads which lead to landslide, what we saw during the Uttarakhand disaster, mountainous area are also very difficult terrain, and it is tough even to evaluate these areas. So what are some of the innovative or preventive measures or strategies that should be adopted for landslide management, keeping in mind the future development activities, especially in hilly areas?
Thank you, Raju. I am audible now?
Yes, sir.
There has always been a link between disaster and the manner in which development has been carried out in ecological fragile region. We need to ponder over each factor and think where we are lacking, what option we have to construct a disaster resilient infrastructure. Before any kind of development activities, it is very important to consider the probability of landslides and like process and consideration for environmental as well as ecological consequences we can have by our development activities. We have to synchronize our development activities with the attributes of our slopes. And a holistic multi-hazard slope maintenance practice should be followed to enhance the resilience of our built environment. Honorable PM also emphasized in his 10-point agenda on the need to mainstream disaster risk reduction strategies in each and every development activities to ensure that our infrastructure are resilient for forthcoming disaster. Thank you, Raju.
Thank you, sir, for your response. Now, moving ahead with our last presentation, we have with us Shri Sarat Chandra, Director, Flood Forecasting and Monitoring, Central Water Commission. Shri Sarat Chandra ji has more than 25 years of experience working in water resource sector, such as national water planning, irrigation planning, survey, and investigation of hydroelectric project, flood management scheme. Shri Sarat Chandra is presently looking after flood forecasting activities of the India. We are fortunate to have you with us, sir, to share your experience and knowledge. Over to you, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Over to you, sir.
Good morning. Am I audible, clear?
Yes, sir. You are audible and visible.
Okay. So I am sharing my presentation.
Okay, sir.
Presentation is clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Raju. See, of late, there has been great awareness about this disaster risk reduction, and so is the number of occurrences of disaster is also increasing. You can see in this graph that if we compare from 1980, number of disastrous events has almost doubled. And you can also see that among these all disasters, flood is one of the major prominent disaster all over the world. But particularly in this South Asian region and India, this comprises of nearly 1/3 of disasters. And it has transboundary effects too. Means if there is a heavy extreme meteorological event in the region of Nepal that is causing the flood in our northern portion, Bihar as well as Uttar Pradesh. If we see the flood damage statistics in our country, it nearly affects the 0.04% of our GDP annually. And if we examine, actually Central Water Commission maintains the flood damage repository due to heavy rainfall as well as floods in the country. And we are collecting this data since 1953. So average of 1953 to 2018 indicates that it nearly affects the 2 to 3% of the geographical area of the country, 2 to 3% of the cropped area in the country. Similarly, 2 to 3% of the population is affected. Human lives lost is generally average of 1953 to 2018 is 1656 human lives lost. And in terms of cattle lives lost, it is 92,544. But these are average figures. In the individual year, depending upon the flooding, it can be much higher. Suppose in 2018, due to Kerala floods alone, in the monetary term, damage was reported to be around rupees 30,000 crore. So we should see what is the major reason of flood. Prime causative factor of flood is what is the reason? So we all know that we have predominantly monsoon climate in the country. And this monsoon climate has many unique characteristics, and one of them is it shows a high spatial and temporal rainfall variability. We have in the country areas like in northeast, in Cherrapunji, Mohsin Ram, we receive annual rainfall to the tune of 11,000 mm. Whereas in the western Rajasthan, we have very scanty rainfall in the range of 100 mm rainfall, annual rainfall. So this huge spatial rainfall variability, then if we examine it in the time dimension, so that monsoon rainfall is actually coming in only 3-4 months, like June, July, August, September. So that is the main reason of flooding in the country, huge spatial and temporal variability. And it has been seen, enough evidences are now there that even this variability is increasing. In leaner number of days, that extreme rainfall is coming. Total amount country receives annually is 4,000 mm. That amount is not being altered, but then time in which those 4,000 mm rainfall is being realized is leaner, becoming leaner, maybe due to climate change or whatever may be the reason, but evidences are that rainfall is coming in leaner number of days. So we should start, what is actually flood, how it is defined. Flood has its origin in English word which means flow of water, tide. So hydrologically, if we define flood, that is due to some extreme rainfall event, rainfall will be generated and that will emerge in the river flow, that is flood. When water comes in the river beyond its carrying capacity and it spills the bank, then it is called, then it causes flooding in the low-lying areas near the banks of the rivers. And this type of flood is known as riverine flooding. This is also termed as fluvial flooding. Then second is urban flooding, which is also termed as pluvial flooding. This is due to the fact that in urban areas, a lot of concretization is taking place, and so these pavements are coming up, and that increases the rate of runoff regeneration because infiltration capacity has decreased. If we compare with rainfall intensity, infiltration capacity has decreased in those areas, and whole rainfall is converting into the rainfall. It is also due to the revised its carrying capacity of the drains. So some sort of measures should be taken, but storm water flooding is becoming very common in almost all major cities, towns. Now it has been experienced. Similar high intensity rainfall, if it comes in the countryside areas, it is resulting into the flash flood. And this is not necessarily guided by the rivers. Even if on the steep slopes, heavy rainfall is occurring, then it causes flash floods. 2013 Kedarnath flood is the one of the prominent example of flash flood. And now it is each year somewhere flash flood is coming. Then another type of flooding our country faces is coastal flooding, where in coastal areas, this may be the rainfall in the upper catchment, as well as it may be combined with the tidal effect in the coastal areas. So these important coastal towns like Mumbai, Chennai are experiencing this coastal flooding. So I have already told that enough evidences now is there that extreme frequency as well as intensity of extreme weather events have increased, and that has resulted into the increase in number and intensity of the flooding event too. Some of the prominent examples are Sri Salem floods in 2009, Kedarnath floods in 2013, even in Srinagar floods, Jhelum river flowed in with extreme volume of water in 2014. That also caused flash floods in Srinagar. If we examine the flood prone area map of the country, we can see that some of the areas like Ganga and Brahmaputra basin, and if we consider states, it is Assam, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, they are receiving the flood each year. Maybe degree may vary, but they are receiving annual flooding. But some of the area are receiving after the gap of 5 years. Those areas may experience the flood in 1 in 25 years. But these areas, Uttar Pradesh, Ganga catchment, these all are receiving annual flooding almost. One of the, now coming to the flood risk, see, it has been realized that complete protection from flood is not possible. So we generally aim to minimize its impact, minimize the losses. So globally in recent times, there has been a paradigm shift from flood control and management to flood risk control and management. So we need to understand what is flood risk. So flood risk in our Indian context depends on the three prime factors: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. So what is hazard? As I have already told, there is huge spatial and temporal rainfall variability that leads to the natural flooding event in the country. And that is known as hazard. That is a hazard for us. There is no much control over these hazard events from our side. Only we can employ some structural measures and we can protect those areas for certain level of floods. Like generally, as per practice in our country, we protect the agricultural areas from 1 in 25-year flood and urban or industrial areas with 1 in 100-year floods through constructing embankments or some other structural measures. Then second component is exposure. This is the administrative and governance issues in which we need to employ floodplain zoning regulations, flood-proofing regulations. We will explain in detail. I will explain in detail the flood zoning. You need to issue such guidelines, regulation guidelines, that buildings plinth level should be above the 1 in 100-year return period flood levels. Similarly, in flood planning zones, we need not establish hazardous industries or some sort of things near to the bank of the river. So these are governance issues. We need to frame these guidelines, and we sacrosanctly we need to implement those guidelines. Then third element is also very important, that is vulnerability element. See, one of the vulnerability element is channel encroachment. See, vulnerability, if from disaster management angle we examine that socio-economic conditions of the people in those areas, economic upliftment of people in those areas, these are the vulnerability elements. From water resources engineering point of view, I have listed down some vulnerability element like channel encroachment, faulty reservoir operation. This has been now a frequent news. Each year, some dam is being blamed that dam operation has not been done properly, and that is leading to the flood in downstream area. So that is also one of the vulnerability element. We will see how dam can be properly operated. Dams by design are for flood moderation, but then if you are not operating it properly, particularly in the Indian context where dams are not made dedicated for flood moderation, you are inviting trouble. Similarly, drainage congestion in low-lying areas, narrow exit to the sea, coastal flooding. These are some. Embankment is the most effective measure for flood protection. But then if it has not been designed properly and maintained not properly, breaches are frequently occurring, then it is leading to a lot of damages. See, in Brahmaputra as well as Ganga in Bihar, lot of damages are being caused due to the embankment breaches. Lot of damages have been, the reason for damages have been the embankment breaches. Embankment have been made to protect those areas, but since they have not been maintained properly, they have not been designed properly, they are causing breaches, and this is leading to the further damage in those areas. So this is also one vulnerability element. So we need to manage all these three elements, and particularly vulnerable element, to minimize the loss. Then globally, following risk management strategy are being followed. First is risk avoidance. This is that you completely avoid the risk. Means any developmental work should be in non-flood prone area only. But this is a very expensive proposition for a country like ours. We have own challenges. We cannot make all flood prone area where none of the development works can take place. This is possible where there is no population pressure. There you can follow. Also, our economic development is of such status that we cannot protect all areas with 1 in 15,000 year flood. See, Netherlands has protected its whole country where the country is below MSL, but they have protected that country with 1 in 15,000 years flood. That is also not possible in our country. We have our own challenges. So we need to adopt risk acceptance. Certain level of risk we have to accept. And also there are two subcomponents of that strategy. Without any mitigation structures, you can lead to, that will be the crisis management situation. And with certain mitigation measures, that is termed as risk management. So our aim only should be that we have to shift from crisis management situation to the risk management situation. Then third strategy is risk mitigation, where we need to adopt some drainage management measures. Like urban flooding has become a common feature. We need to upgrade our storm drainage network in the urban areas. Then water trading, which is considered as one of the unconventional measures. Like we need to adopt that interbasin water transfer, interlinking of rivers. So these are the known as risk mitigation strategies. Transfer strategy, and that is less expensive than the risk avoidance strategies, in which we want to transfer the risk to the insurance companies. Means insurance charges you have to be enhanced in the areas near to the banks, and this flood insurance policy you need to devise and implement that. Then last is the risk monitoring. Dynamic updating to cater the rapidly changing scenario is must. So these are the main 5 risk management strategy in the country. But for Indian context, most important is that we have to move from crisis management to risk management. See, among the various flood risk mitigation strategies, we have seen that the first we need to implement floodplain zoning. If we are implementing floodplain zoning properly, then you are reducing the initial risk to at least 20-30%. So that measure needs to be taken first. Then various structural measures and even non-structural measures need to be taken. Non-structural measures means flood forecasting or like this. So we can gradually reduce to the we can gradually reduce the risk level, but still we will left with some residual risk. Last 2 measures like flood proofing and insurance, in which also need to be taken at community level, personal level, like insurance in which community needs to be involved. So these are the some reducing flood risk strategies, and among that, first priority should be given to floodplain zoning. And floodplain zoning, for floodplain zoning, it starts with first, what is the flood risk assessment? For flood risk assessment, first you need to map the all three elements which I have described: hazard elements, exposure elements, vulnerability elements. I have already told that exposure elements to be taken care of by the administration of the district, or means that is a governance issue. Residential guideline, industrial guidelines need to be formulated in a proper way, and then this can be done. Depending upon the mapping of all these hazard, exposure and vulnerability, we will derive a risk matrix and will quantify that what is the annual exceedance flood damage probability in those areas and how that can be protected. Some of the global experiences I am mentioning. See, Japan, this is for Japan, in which they have categorized the whole flood management strategy or disaster management strategy into two categories. Proactive means before the advent of the disaster, and reactive, which need to be followed after the occurrence of the disaster. In proactive, then there are two subtypes: prevention strategy and then the mitigation strategy. And I have listed down that in the context of flooding, what should be the mitigation strategy, what should be the prevention strategy. And similarly, it has been given here. See, as I already mentioned, that the floodplain zoning is the first major strategy which needs to be adopted. See, in Japan, at municipality level, they have prepared the flood hazard map. And they have identified that where in the event of flooding, flood shelters, people can be shifted to those shelters. So at very micro level, they have made flood hazard maps. But we have not been even successful at the macro level, even for flood hazard map. So that should be the first strategy. Then you see their data network. Whole Japan country, which has geographical area almost 1/10 of our India, but they have installed 26 radars, and they are capturing almost each nook and corner of their country, and meteorological data is very important, and that being captured. They have also 26,000 telemetry stations where automatic data is coming in the modeling centers. When I am talking this data, this is mainly primarily weather data, rainfall, hourly updates are coming, that what is the rainfall, what is it is going to be there. So these are the major strategies which being adopted in Japan. If we see the United States, their FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Strategy, has similarly make the hazard map for the whole USA, and that hazard map is depending upon the return period of the flooding, that which return period of the flooding is affected in which area, and accordingly different measures have been employed in this area. If we see European countries, there are 5 major type of strategies: flood recovery, flood preparation, flood risk prevention, flood defense, flood risk mitigation. So priority differs, and it has been generally seen that previously main strategies were flood defense, flood prevention, and flood recovery, but gradually they are also shifting towards the flood mitigation and flood preparation. Now I will explain the integrated flood management approach. And mainly there are 3 dimensions to this integrated flood management approach. See, first dimension is that we need to adopt a very well judicious mix of structural measures as well as non-structural measures. When we are talking of structural measures, through which we aim that we prevent the flood coming to the population, means in the inhabited locality, we want to prevent the flood water coming there. A structural measure has some advantages, but it has some disadvantages too. If you are making a embankment in a certain street, it will certainly lead to the flooding in some other areas, particularly in the downstream, due to some efflux. So we also need to adopt non-structural measures. See, Rashtriya Bad Ayog identified that in countries generally 40 million hectares area is flood prone. And at that similar time, it was assessed that we can protect to certain degree of flood in 80% of the areas, means 32 million hectare areas can be provided some protection through structural measures. But still there are 8 million hectare areas where you need to adopt some non-structural measure, where after the flood forecast has been made, you need to take evacuation and relief works. That is also needed. But I am telling that non-structural measures is not the panacea. That only cannot flood-proof the whole area, because if you know the Bihar, where people want to prefer to live with knee-deep water, but they generally don't. People generally don't want to evacuate from their house. So you cannot adopt only non-structural measures to protect the flooding. So both judicious mix of both measures is very much essential. Then second dimension is that we generally tend to adopt flood management works for the critical reaches only, but that is not the need of the hour. We need to plan flood management work for the whole basin. See, in 2019, Chambal, there was extreme meteorological event in the Chambal river basin, and that caused the flooding up to Farakka in the Ganga. When Chambal combined at the confluence of Yamuna, water level rose there. Then Yamuna confluences with main Ganga stream. Then water level rose there, and ultimately water level rose up to Farakka. Patna, Gandhi Ghat was flooded. So you need to combine flood management. You need to have a flood management approach for the whole basin, and not only for the critical reaches. Then third dimension is also very important. Flood management strategy should not be only the responsibility of water resources department or disaster management authorities. Whole central ministries like agriculture, as well as state departments, and even with the community, public needs to be involved in planning those flood management strategy. So this third dimension is also becoming very important. Community development in flood proofing of the area is becoming very important now. So these are the main three dimensions of integrated flood management. Now coming to the structural measures. Most effective measures is considered as dams, reservoirs. It is designed for flood moderation, because in a country you need, I already mentioned that there are huge spatial rainfall variability. So that leads to the water availability scenario also. In certain period of time or in certain areas, we have an abundance of water, and simultaneously in that period of time in another areas we have water deficit. So we need to store the water where it is available in abundance to be utilized during the lean time when there is no water in those areas. So of course there is need of storage, but then problem is that this dam provides the flood moderation from 2 points of view. It's prevent the peak in reaching with providing a time lag, as well as it reduces the peak through attenuation. So these two measures are employed through the dams, storages, to prevent the flood in those areas. But see, challenge with us is that none of the dam in our country has been designed for flood moderation. We have to utilize flood moderation as incidental benefits from the dam. Generally, those are designed for irrigation, power, and for that we need to fill the dam as soon as possible. But for flood moderation, we keep it to be empty, so that when some flood peak comes, that will be absorbed in the reservoir and downstream areas will be prevented from flooding. So both are competing demands, contradictory in nature. So what we need to have a trade-off, that how much we can deplete so that we don't have huge loss commercially in power production or agricultural irrigation demand are also meet to a certain extent. But it is a truth that saving human lives should be given priority, and dams should be operated accordingly. So how that can be done? See, these are the some examples that generally how flood provides the flood moderation. See, this is the 1978 major flood event in the Damodar Basin, where Mathan and Panchayat dams provided flood moderation to the tune of 79%. Means flood inflow came about 7,80,000 cusac, but it was moderated. It was absorbed in the flood, and only outflow was 1,63,000 cusac. Similarly, various examples are there. 1994 Bhakra has provided moderation, and 1995 Pong has provided the moderation. Even the 2019 Gandhi Sagar, that has also provided flood moderation to the tune of 60%. Point is that when some disaster occurs, extreme flood comes, that comes immediately in the news. But when dam has provided this flood moderation, that never is highlighted. So I don't say that flood operation of reservoirs is very mandatory from the point of view of flood moderation. And for that, how we need to devise a decision support system, that how rule curves should be designed for flood moderation. See, this is the important zones of dam in our country generally adopted. Bottommost is the dead storage zone, where it is expected that siltation in the dam reservoir will be settled. After that, buffer zone comes. That is for the very in extreme scenario, when there is some drought here, then this water can be used in buffer zone water. Then comes the conservation zone, means for what main purpose dam has been desired, irrigation, hydropower. And then after that, we generally keep the flood control zone, in which water level can vary in such a way that the flood moderation can be achieved in the downstream areas. See, after 2018 flood, we have devised, Central Water Commission has devised the rule levels for Iduki Reservoir. We have also devised for Himalayan Reservoir, then Kaki Dam. See, in this left portion and top half, we see a triangular area. That is the main where we can utilize that zone as dynamic flood cushion. Means if water level is expected to reach the FRL, immediately that should be depleted. So that comes to the flood moderation level, that red color curve. Immediately water should be brought down to that level. See, one more thing is that only a small reservoirs cannot be utilized for flood moderation, because in a single high intensity rainfall that can be immediately filled, but large reservoirs can certainly be utilized for dynamic flood cushion. That rule curves should also be utilized for the inflow forecasting. That is a very important tool for real-time operation of the reservoir, because that gives an advanced signal that this inflow is expected and your reservoir can reach at this water level. So you take preemptive measures. You start depleting the reservoir. Then in a river basin, maybe some cascading reservoirs or even parallel reservoirs that need to be managed in an integrated manner. We have devised an integrated operation plan in which we have taken the 8 major rivers, but in which we need a very proactive support from state government, so that data of inflow and outflow should be supplied on real-time basis. Suppose, for example, we have given Ganga Integrated Reservoir Operation Plan, in which 4 system of dams clusters have been identified. System 1 is in upstream areas of Ganga, where 2 dams have been taken, Tehri Dam and Kalagar Dam on Ram Ganga. System 2 is of Chambal, in which Gandhi Sagar Dam, Rana Pratap Sagar Dam, Kota Barrage, Bisalpur Dam has been taken. System 3 is from Kenbetwa, Rajghat Dam and Matatilan Dam. System 4 pertains to the Son River system, Bansagar Dam, Rihand Dam. So these all 4 systems should be utilized, so that for the whole Ganga system, which has been identified as system 5 whole Ganga, downstream areas after downstream of Patna, flooding can be moderated. So all these 4 systems needs to be operated in an integrated manner, so that flooding effects are minimized in the downstream areas of Ganga. Then second effective measure have been found to be embankment. But I have already mentioned that a proper design of drainage means sluices as well as its proper maintenance should be envisaged. Otherwise, it will lead to breachage and that causes huge damage. Second measure which is generally being adopted to increase the carrying capacity of the river is dredging, channel drainage and improvement. It has not been found a very techno-economically sustainable solution, but still some critical reaches, like when one tributary is confluencing with the main river. So on that mouth, you can adopt some dredging operation. Maintenance dredging is already being taken by for navigation purposes. Capital dredging has not been found a very sustainable solution, but still for critical reaches, this is one of the measures. Then one measure is detention and retention basins. Small water bodies should be utilized, that should be cleaned, and when some flood comes, that should be diverted. That flood wave can be diverted to some detention basins and retention basins. From detention basins through overflow or through outflow, it can be utilized for other purposes also, like irrigation and some other purposes also. So detention and retention basin are also one effective flood structural measure for flood moderation. Then bypass and diversion channel is one measure. See, this is very important for suppose Jhelum basin. Srinagar town, Jhelum river passes through the Srinagar town. So you can, when some flooding event occurs, by designing a bypass channel or flood spill channel, so that that flooding event passes through that spill channel and then drains into after the Srinagar town. Suppose there is a water body, Uller Lake, in that we can divert that water. So this is also one of the measures have been found. See, when we are designing the flood spill channels, diverted water can be drained into the same river also, or if some another parallel stream is available, that water can be diverted to that spill channel also. Then particularly in Ganga and Brahmaputra, siltation has been a very major problem, and that is leading to the bank erosion. So we also need to take some anti-erosion works, particularly in Brahmaputra and Ganga basins. Some important anti-erosion works are groins, boulder apron, porcupine works. This groins is very effective in diverting the current to impact the banks and it leading it to the main river channel, and also deposition of silt in those areas so that silt doesn't flow along the current and impacts the banks. Then porcupine works is also very used in Bengal and northeastern area. Basically, this is a groin, but this is a permeable groin, not impermeable grams. Water can also pass through this and then effectively reduce the velocity in those areas and also causes silt to lie there. So through embankment and channel drainage improvement, we have been able to achieve 20 point protection to 20.54 million hectare area for certain degree of flood. Complete flood proofing is not possible from structural measures. So these two measures have been, suppose I have already mentioned that 40 million hectare area in the country was identified as flood prone, and it was expected that 32 million area we can provide certain degree of flood protection measures. So almost 20 million hectare area, half of those areas we have provided some measures. But still some structural measures can be taken up in 10, 12 million hectares. Some of the unconventional example I am giving, like interbasin transfer can be done from water surplus basins to water deficit basins. Then suppose, see, I have already told, depends upon the economic development of the country. Like Thames barrier has been designed, and that is providing protection to London from 1 in 1,000 year floods. Similarly, in Netherlands, these two huge gates have been designed, flood barrier walls, and that is providing to 10,000 year return period flood protection from 10,000 year protection flood. But that is not a very all feasible solution for our country, at least. Coming to the non-structural measures, see, this आर्टिकल आई फाउंड वेरी क्वाइट एप्ट, जिसमें लिखा है कि गलती किसकी, गंगा हमारे घरों तक पहुंची या हमने ही गंगा के क्षेत्र में अपने घर बना लिए। Say in last year, Patna receives flooding in two spell. One was around 20th September, when that Chambal Basin event occurred and water level rise in the river, and that caused in the immediate floodplain zone flooding. But see, these housing societies have come in those floodplain. Patna generally don't expect it because flood wall is made in the town. So it is not generally expected that river water will spill and cause flooding in the Patna town. But then if you have made the apartments in the floodplain area, you have invited trouble yourself. Similarly, when water level was still high and there was extreme rainfall during the 27th and 28th September. So, and that caused less drainage into the river, and that caused the urban flooding scenario in the Patna town. So that is also, you can say, man-made flooding. There was no adequate arrangement of pumping of water to the main Ganga river. And so both events were man-made flooding. In my view, that both events could have been avoided. So what is the conclusion? That flood planning zoning, I already told that is the first main strategies. Central Water Commission has already drafted a bill, model draft bill in 1975, and that has been circulated to all state governments. That an indicative zoning guideline have been provided that to start with, in agricultural area, you can provide three major zones: prohibitive zones that can be kept up to 1 in 25-year flooding, then restrictive zone which can be kept to 1 in 100-year flooding, and then beyond 1 in 100 year that can be simply designated as warning zone. And in warning zone only important defense installation or industries, hospitals could be settled. In restrictive zone, we can make public institutions, government offices, universities. In prohibitive zone, only we can allow simple parks, playground. So similar type of guideline have been issued. Now, depending upon the threat perception, each state needs to enact a bill as well as implementation of that bill. Regarding flood, when a case was filed in NGT, but it was mainly due to avoid the flood due to pollution, and that because a lot of dumping was taking place between Hardwar to Unnao in the main Ganga stem. So NGT directed Central Water Commission to do the floodplain zoning from Hardwar to Unnao. So we have carried out that, and we have adopted mainly two zones. One zone is up to 1 in 5-year flood, and then up to 1 in 25-year flood. We named up to 1 in 25-year flood as regulatory zones, whereas up to 1 in 5-year flood, no development zone. And before that zonation came for notification, NGT directed that up to 100 meters there should be no development, no dumping of e-waste. So similar type of direction. So we need to adopt some that sort of approach. This is just one example where yellow line shows the regulatory zone and red line shows the prohibitory zones where no development zone up to red line zone. So similarly for our stations, we have done like near Kanpur, we have delineated this zone. Yellow is again regulatory zone and red is prohibitory zone. Now coming to the flood forecasting, which is considered as the most cost-effective measure of flood prevention. Mainly four phases are in there. It starts with data collection, transmission and monitoring up to the modeling center. Then data processing in the modeling center means formulation of forecast takes place at the modeling center. Then very important phase of the flood forecasting activities is dissemination. You have made a very good forecasting, but it is not going up to the public. It has not been disseminated properly so that disaster management can take action or even public can take action, that is of no use. So dissemination is also very important. Then response of the SDMA, NDRF, SDRF. So this whole cycle is of flood forecasting activities. This whole 5 phases are in that. Then review and improvement is also very important component, which helps in improvement of our flood forecasting network, as well as improving the accuracy of our flood forecasting. So we started with level forecasting, which was based on the correlation of gauge to gauge. One base station have been established, and then with respect to that, we are forecasting the water level of the forecast station. And it was expected that with respect to that forecasted water level, the state government will devise a warning mechanism where threat perception is based on that expected water level. So this was a very robust mechanism, because if we have devised these correlograms based on the long-term data of water level of both base station and forecasting station, that even takes account of the any rainfall event which have taken event between the base station and forecasting station. So these are the some correlograms, for example, in which we are predicting that if at nth hour gauge at the base station is this much, what is expected at the n plus tth hour gauge at the forecast station. See, warning time in this mechanism depends upon the travel time between the base station and forecasting station. This travel time vary between 6 to 30 hours. 6 hours, suppose we are doing forecasting for Hardwar with respect to the base station Srinagar, up station. So there only 6 hour response time is available. But suppose we are doing forecasting for Gandhi Ghat, Patna with respect to the Allahabad base station, then it almost gives to 30-hour response time. As the distance between the base station and forecasting station increases, but then all other feasibilities also need to be examined. So before explaining our standard operating procedures, there are certain terms: danger level, warning level, highest flood level, very high flood level. Danger level, for a rudimentary definition, is that when water level reaches 30 centimeter below the plinth level designated area, plinth level of the building in those areas, or 10-year flooding events. So that is generally defined at danger level. But this all depends upon the, we arrive these levels in consensus with the state government. The warning level is generally below 0.6 meter to 1 meter below danger level. Highest flood level is if the available data is for 50 years, in those 50 years, what maximum level has. So depending upon these 3 prominent levels, 3 categories of flood have been defined. If water level reaches between warning level and danger level, it is known as above normal flood situation, and normal daily bulletin is issued as per our SOP. Then if water level reaches between danger level and below HFL, highest flood level, it is known as a severe flooding situation, and orange bulletin 3-hourly it is being issued, and it goes to at the highest level, Prime Minister Office, Cabinet Secretariat. And if water level crosses the highest flood level, it is termed as extreme flood situation, and red bulletin at a frequency of hourly is disseminated to the all up to highest authorities. See, we have nearly 1600 hydrometeorological stations, and we monitor flood around the hourly, mainly hourly, through these hydrometeorological observation stations. Out of these, we are issuing flood forecast for 328 stations. This is basically 328 is the subset of 1600, and these flood forecasting stations are also of 2 types. One is level forecasting stations, in which we predict the level of water level of that river along important towns and cities, whatever have been established in the consultation with the state government. And second category of flood forecasting station is inflow forecasting stations, which are 130 in number, in which we are predicting what is the amount of water expected, inflow of water expected in that reservoir, dams, or barrages. So over the years, there has been expansion of our network. See, there has been a major jump in the year 2019, when we have expanded our network from 249 to 325. And in next 5 years, we have the plan to achieve that 375 figure, so that we can have total forecasting station up to 375. State-wise distribution, it is showing. You can see that mainly peninsular India have more number of dams, so their inflow forecasting stations are more, whereas in the plain areas, Bihar and Assam, mainly we have flood forecast level forecasting stations. Basin wise, similar distribution. In the basin of Ganga, mainly level forecasting stations are more, but if you examine the Kaveri, inflow forecasting stations are more than level forecasting stations. Establishment of forecasting stations has helped in prevention of human lives lost. If we compare decadal number of stations, but then if you see that a certain level of threshold forecasting station have been achieved around 80-85, then we have seen that decadal percentage lives lost has started decreasing. But this is not only due to the flood forecasting station, other measures have also been taken into account, but certainly it has helped in reduction of human life. In absolute terms, if you see, number of lives has not been shown decreasing because population is also increasing. But if you examine the percentage lives lost in a decade, we have seen that human lives lost is decreasing. This is our flood forecasting setup country-wise. It operates at 2 levels. At regional level, we have divisional flood control room, and at central level, we have central flood control room. At divisional level, taking the data from IMD, from our sites, from project authorities, forecast is formulated, and it is being disseminated to the civil authorities, district administrations, and also to the media. And near real time, it is coming to the central flood control room through a website, and it is being transmitted to central ministries, NDMA, integrated operation control room. It goes. That central control room is also our 24/7 365 control room for Department of Water Resources. What we can see that there is there is a scope of better coordination at the regional level with our regional IMD offices, with our regional SDMAs, State Disaster Management Authority, as well as the state government. Also with the public, we can achieve a better coordination with the public at the regional level. This is our flood forecasting website. You can visit that, india-water.gov.in, and there you can see all the real-time water level you can monitor, hourly water level you can monitor. Suppose in this graph, blue dots indicates the hourly water level, where the red portion indicates what will be the forecasted water level in the coming subsequent time series. Also, our dashboard is available in the Central Water Commission's website. At the end of the day, we also issue daily flood situation report cum advisories, where we can see the advisories for the 3 days, that what is water level, where water level can rise, whether it can be in the falling trend. So these all are available online now. This is our flood forecasting station shown in dashboard. This is the general format of our bulletins, in which we can see in summary that how many our stations are in extreme flood situation, how many in severe flood situations, how many are in above normal, and how many inflow forecasts have been issued in a day. General bulletin have information like that for forecasting station is in which district, in which state, what is the warning level, danger level, and what is the forecasted, and all these informations are there. Similarly, for reservoirs, what is the full reservoir level, what is the maximum water level, what is the inflow expected. So all these informations are given. And so now over the years, we have been modernizing our network, starting with data collection network. We are moving to telemetry system from the normal that manual gauge reading. Then in field of forecast formulation, from a statistical correlation based technique we are also moving to rainfall runoff based modeling system. Then people are more interested in inundation forecasting, means which area will be inundated and what is the inundation depth expected. So we have moved to the inundation forecast also, and we have one agreement with Google in which they are using latest technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and they are giving inundation alerts around our flood forecasting stage. Then in dissemination, social media platform has now become very powerful for disseminating the flood alert. Initially, we were giving the flood forecast to the state agencies, and it was expected that depending upon the threat perception, they will issue the warning. But now in this age, we are directly started using our forecast to the social media platform. So now in modeling, we are utilizing the actual rainfall, observed rainfall, as well as the forecasted rainfall given by the IMD. And we are using important data utilized in the models are ground-based rainfall, satellite-based rainfall. We are using snow cover, snow melting. We are also accounting then temperature, river flow, satellite imagery, water level, reservoir level. These all are data being used now. And ultimately, we are through simulation, we are arriving at some forecast at that forecasting station in 3-day advance. In conventional method, it was limited generally to a 1-day forecasted water level, but now we have moved to an attempt is now being made to extend it for a week. So this is two types of modeling are required. One is the hydrological modeling, in which rainfall runoff equation is solved, and other is hydraulic modeling, in which Saint-Venant equation is solved, so that in the river how water will flow, that is being simulated. This is our dedicated website for the 3-day advisory, in which all stations are shown. 72-hour forecast is now available, and district block layer are provided in that, so you can see that which block can be affected in those areas. Totally in-house this has been developed, and 3-hour GIS based. Total website is GIS based, and you can easily navigate through this website. Clicking on any forecasting station, real-time hydrograph, you can see tabular form also information is there, that in which day what is the expected water level in those areas. See, this is the hydrograph. In top portion, left portion shows the observed rainfall, and right portion shows the forecasted rainfall. Similarly, in bottom portion, left portion indicates the observed water level at that forecasting station, and right portion indicates the forecasted water level in those areas. So now coming to the inundation modeling. See, inundation modeling gives a better rich visual output, showing moving water spread that is easy to interpret even by the non-technical person. So this is one example. In different color, we can show that what is the inundation depth expected in that area. So we have done some work in inundation modeling also. One, I have already mentioned that Hardwar 2 now we have done floodplain demarcation. That has been through the 2-dimensional 2D modeling. Now there are two possibilities. One, we can prepare a atlas based on the return period of flooding. Real-time inundation forecasting requires a lot of computer resources as well as modeling runtime also. That requires a huge resources. So other way is very practical way is that to have a atlas based on the return period of flushing. So for Brahmaputra main stem, we have made some library in that this can be used in conjunction with our conventional forecast also. So suppose Guwahati reaches danger level, which is corroborate to the 10-year flood frequency. So we can see that these 5 districts can be affected. After 2018, we have done the flood simulation study for the Kerala flood. And at the block level, we have made the atlas that which return period of flood can affect which block in the Kerala. So this is the Kerala flooding. Then also we have done for Mahanadi, where the two factors takes into account rainfall as well as tidal effect from the coast, and then this gives the inundation in those coastal areas. Then this is about CWC Google collaboration, in which we are providing Google our hydrological data, and they are utilizing our artificial intelligence and machine learning concept to give inundation alert in this area. See, this is the inundation alert issued in September 2019 corresponding to the Patna flooding. A dedicated dashboard is also there where you can see all the active flood alerts on that side. These type of alerts are coming that at this station, what is the expected rise in the water level, and bottom portion shows inundation area. By clicking at that point, we can see. So dissemination, these are all the different platforms which we are using for dissemination. So key takeaways from this presentation are these. It is very essential to manage the various vulnerability elements like avoiding floodplain encroachment, avoid faulty reservoir operation to minimize the flood risk. Then we need to adopt integrated flood management approach, means we have to use a very well judicious mix of structural and non-structural measures to minimize the flood risk. Then reservoirs, as I said, we have the challenge because we don't have dedicated reservoirs for flood moderation, but we have to devise rule curves, and we have to utilize dynamic flood cushion available in the reservoirs and achieve the flood moderation. Then inflow forecasting needs to be utilized as a very important tool for real-time operation of the reservoir. We also need to devise the emergency action plan for all dam break scenario or extreme flood situations. For all the important major dams. Then better coordination of data flow is needed with different agencies. That is actually need of the hour. Community involvement is very necessary. And then this is for our source searching also from Central Water Commission, that we still need to have a very more impact based warning at a very micro level. We need to go see meteorological forecast, rainfall forecast is doing fine for a district level, but flood forecasting needs to be at a more micro level, means we need to go at the village level, at least at the block level. That's all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your detailed presentation. As we all know that the number and the severity of natural disaster is rising, climate undergo changes, and as the world population continue to increase. As sir has mentioned, as per the report of CREED and UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, since 1995, flood has accounted for 47% of all weather-related disasters. The statistics I'm mentioning is taken from EMDAT. Like EMDAT is a global database on natural and technological disaster containing essential core data on occurrence and effect of more than 21,000 disasters in the world. I will request everyone to go and check it out. Sir also presented a very detailed integrated flood management approach, flood forecasting, and various other activities carried out by the Central Water Commission. Has also highlighted how CWC is continuously working in the field of water resource and is charged with general responsibilities of initiating, coordinating, and furthering in consultant with the state governments concerned schemes for control, conservation, and utilization of water resources throughout the country. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. We have, sir, some questions. The first question, however, sir, you have already partially answered this question while discussing the third dimension of integrated disaster management approach. The question is, sir, who are the most important stakeholder in sustainable water resource management, as stakeholder participation is very important?
Yeah, I've already mentioned that integrated flood management, third dimension is that we need to involve all the agencies at the central level, at the state level, and people. That is the most important contribution from direct who are going to be affected from flood. Their feedback is very important. See, we are issuing flood forecast, we are preparing a project of a structural measure, embankment, but it's very necessary to ask from the public whether this embankment will be useful for you or not, or what forecast we are using, that is really useful to you or not. Suppose now Google is issuing inundation alert. So we have also asked Google to give a performance evaluation report. They are telling that we have issued millions of notifications. But I asked from Google that you give a performance evaluation report. You take the feedback of common people that whether those notifications were really received at the user end or not, and if received, that was really useful or not. So some sort of performance evaluation report should come up. So that is the mainly. Of course, that public is the main stakeholder, and for public, for the benefit of public, we are doing all these forecasting as well as making these structural measures. Hopefully, I am explaining the right point.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. And so the second question is from Sir Raju Baski from Jharkhand. He has raised this question. Sir, India is blessed with a dense network of rivers. Some part of India experience drought, while some experience flood every year. So, can interlinking of river be an innovative approach for effective management of water resource in India to enhance the irrigation and groundwater recharge and to reduce the persistent flood in some part and water shortage in other part of the India?
Yes, yes, certainly. Interbasin transfer is one of the long-term measure for mitigation of the flood. But see, that also requires mainly construction of dams. Suppose we want to transfer the water from the northern tributaries of Ganga, from this Kosi, Gandak, to the western side of the country, that needs some diversion structure proposed there. See, dams need to be constructed, and that comes, proper site is coming in the Nepal territory. So a lot of consensus building is going on. Hopefully that will come up, and then those dams will be in place, and then we will be able to transfer those surplus water to the water scarce areas of like Rajasthan and some other areas also. That is a major effective measure, but of course that is a long-term plan, and see if it sees the end of the tunnel.
And sir, last question is from Dr. Vinay Kumar. The question is, what strategy has been planned for desilting of reservoir as water holding capacity decreases by time and the water level rises gradually, inundating some new areas, dam especially?
For reservoir, see, there are some inbuilt mechanism in them, like silt excluders are being designed in the dam. But then annual survey by the dam authorities is also needed. See how much siltation has occurred, and they can make some plan of dredging those silt. And see, siltation seems to be a very good measure, but then that disposal is a very big problem. Where to dispose so much quantity, huge quantity of silt, that is becoming very. So presently it has been considered that some more studies required, that how those whole silt quantity locally, where can be disposed, whether it can be disposed in the agricultural field or not, that requires in-depth study. So presently it has not been found to be very sustainable solution, but of course desilting, some inbuilt mechanism should be given thrust, that proper silt excluder should be designed on real-time basis, that silt should be excluded with some bypass channel or something like that. So that is the case.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving us your so precious time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we have come to the end of today's technical session. And in the end, it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. So I wish to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Tankeswar Kumar, VC, Guru, Jamweswar University of Science and Technology, Professor Trilok Nath Singh, VC, Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapit Varanasi, Sri Sarat Chandraji, Director, FFM, Central Water Commission, Professor Kapil Gupta, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, and Mr. Anil Kathet, young professional NIDM, for their presence and to enlighten the participant with their vast knowledge and experience. Also, I will wish to express my gratitude to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director NIDM, for providing us the innovative and encouraging environment and always providing us the continuous enthusiasm and valuable suggestion throughout our endeavors. And I am thankful to our GMR team also for their continuous support, and our IT team, Mr. Balaji, Mr. Gaurav Sinha, Sovit, for making this event a successful one. I would like to inform that tomorrow is the last day of our 5-day training program, and we will share the feedback link tomorrow. Today, there is no feedback link. You don't have to worry about your attendance, which is automatically recorded by the Cisco Webex event, and there is no separate attendance sheet. And I also like to take this opportunity to inform you that we are expecting tomorrow, Dr. Kiran Bediji, IPS retired Lieutenant Governor of Pondicherry, to join us in the valediction session, and Dr. Pankaj Mittal, Secretary General of the Association of the Indian University, who will join us in the tomorrow's session. We will also be joined by our distinguished speaker, Professor Ravi Sinha, IIT Bombay, Sri Krishna Vatsa, member NDMA, and Dr. Rajendra Singh, water conservationist and environmentalist, also known as the Waterman of India. So with this, we have come to the end of today's session. Thank you everyone for joining us in today's session. So in the end, I will request Dr. Harjeet Kaur to kindly assist our participant regarding the assessment. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you,
Raju.
Raju. May I leave now?
Yes.
Yes, sir. You may leave now, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
For all the participant, I want to explain one thing about assignment, that there is no hard and fast rule to submit assignment in a given format, and the assignment should be submit on 25th September evening via email, and email ID we have mentioned in the assignment tablet already. The day-wise exercise is sum of one project, that is HVCR, Hazard, Vulnerability, Capacity and Risk Assessment. Suppose like the day one exercise, we have given the identify the hazard in your given area. So suppose you are carrying out a project in the coastal area. So in coastal area, the hazard they are facing are cyclone, flood, others. So for cyclone, the vulnerability, the physical vulnerabilities, building, electrical poles, and etc. Similarly, find out the social and economic vulnerability for that particular hazard. And the table we have provided, that means your hazard and vulnerability should cover this feature. It doesn't mean that you have to calculate all the hazard mentioned in the table in assignment format. Then the third assignment is lack of coping capacity. That is also related to hazard and vulnerability. Like why we are failure to make our area build resilient. You should point out the reason for the failure. And the day 4 assignment means you should propose a management plan for area that you have chosen for day 1 exercise. That means for the hazard identification and vulnerability and so on. As day 3 and day 4 lectures are on management strategies, and so you should write in this direction that you have learned from the speakers or from the presentations. Like the today presentations, we have urban flood management and landslide management. So you should focus like this way. और मैं ये भी कहना चाहूंगी, कुछ पार्टिसिपेंट ने ये भी पूछा है कि हम अपना जो असाइनमेंट है हिंदी में सबमिट कर सकते हैं. तो हाँ, आप अपना असाइनमेंट हिंदी में सबमिट कर सकते हैं और इंग्लिश में भी कर सकते हैं. ये 2 लैंग्वेज फॉर्मेट आप कर सकते हो. और ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको बहुत बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट करना है 10-20 पेज का. नहीं, हमारा मेन मोटो है कि आपने इस डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट के फैकल्टी डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम में क्या सीखा है. तो आप ये नहीं है कि आपको बहुत सारी बुक्स और ये सब पढ़ के आप एक पूरा HVCR के ऊपर एक्सरसाइज करेंगे. द मेन थिंग यू कैन टेक, आप अपना घर का एग्जांपल ले सकते हो कि आप घर में क्या आपके हैजर्ड हो सकते हैं. फायर हो सकता है, इलेक्ट्रिकल प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है. आप घर के बाहर देखो तो आपके इलेक्ट्रिकल पोल कैसे है, जो वायरिंग है वो अंडरग्राउंड है कि ऊपर से है, तो ये सब चीजें भी है जो हैजर्ड को कंट्रीब्यूट करती हैं। तो आप इस एंगल से भी सोच सकते हो। और एक छोटी सी इफेक्टिव एक्सरसाइज, मतलब कि आपको अपने एरिया या जहाँ जो भी आप पर्टिकुलर एरिया ले रहे हो, आप उसके लिए हैजर्ड आइडेंटिफाई करो, वल्नरेबिलिटी लिखो, फिर आप उसके लिए रिस्क असेसमेंट, और जो आपने ये HPCR की एक्सरसाइज पूरी कंपाइल की है उसका एक मैनेजमेंट प्लान होना चाहिए। कुछ लोगों ने चैट बॉक्स पे ये भी कमेंट किया है कि मैम हम एक्सरसाइज अलग अलग सबमिट करेंगे क्या, ये कंपाइल करेंगे? तो ये हमारा जो डे वाइज एक्सरसाइज है, ये हमने पूरा लेक्चर वाइज ही दिया है कि आपको ये पूरा एक असाइनमेंट है, ये नहीं कि ये अलग अलग असाइनमेंट है, आपको इसको पूरा कंपाइल करके हमें सबमिट करना है। जो आप अगर हैजर्ड एरिया आप कोस्टल के लिए कर रहे हो या हिल के लिए कर रहे हो, तो आप हिल के लिए ही मेंशन करो, आप कोस्टल के लिए कर रहे हो कोस्टल के लिए करो। तो इस तरीके से आप अपनी एक्सरसाइज को बना सकते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है कि आप लोगों की जो भी क्वेरी है वो सॉल्व हो गई होगी। तो थैंक यू वेरी मच। और प्लीज मैं ये बार बार कहूंगी कि असाइनमेंट जो गिवन ईमेल आईडी है उसी में सबमिट किया जाए। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Hello, Anil sir.
Yes, Rajiv.
Yeah, I think, sir, we can end today meeting, sir.